There will be no real non-controlled currency in the world.
We're coming for you, banks.
Bitcoin is punk rock. Deal with it.
You split, we bankrupt you.
Do you use Lightning wallets to pay for things or not?
No.
Bitcoin Cash would be seen as more of a threat to the United States hegemony than Bitcoin.
Miles Town, what's your favorite kind of money?
Bitcoin Cash.
All right. Hello and welcome back to the Bitcoin Cash podcast. Following Bitcoin Cash on its rise to global reserve currency, going to number one, as always. This is episode number 48, Bitcoin Economy Analysis and Fork Divergence, featuring Emergent Reasons and Cheap Lightning. We had a last minute change in the guest for anybody who was watching the announcements, but we'll get the Nick on later. He was sick, but he'll be on another episode. Today is Friday, the 27th of May, 2022. I'm your host, Jeremy. Jet is doing the producing as always, and joined by two very special guests. So Cheap Lightning, who's been on the show before, who is a Satoshi's angel and a Bitcoin Cash longtime community member, longtime Bitcoiner, Telegram moderator, just wizard of everything, basically. And Emergent Reasons, who is also big in the sort of BCH governance, I guess I'd say, works with general protocols, building a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the sort of behind the scenes stuff that maybe isn't as the more casual users wouldn't actually be aware of. So I guess, yes, starting with you, Emergent Reasons. It's your first time on the podcast. How'd you get into Bitcoin?
Hey. Actually, it was catching knives probably was how I got into Bitcoin, right? I remember back when the Mt. Gox, all of that stuff happened, right? I had already read the white paper and the price was flying up to $1,000 or something like that. And I was like, I missed it, right? I was like, that's it. I'm one of the plebs now, right? Because I had known about it. And somebody had told me about it, but I thought it was total bullshit. And because I was like, well, you can just copy it or whatever. And then finally, one of my friends was like, no, you actually need to read the white paper. I read it and I was like, oh, it's not. This is actually a meaningful thing. And at that time, right, the price was flying up. I was like, okay, I'm done. And then as the price came falling back down, it was like, oh, okay, maybe it's not the end yet or whatever. So yeah, so it was just a money investment type thing at the beginning. But then once I got involved and started to know the people and the philosophy, and I realized, oh, there's actually, this could actually have an impact on the world, could actually make a difference, could disrupt some of the things that are not so great about the status quo. And yeah, and then just it's been escalating from there.
I mean, it's funny you say that. You got to actually read the white paper. The more of these interviews I do and the more sort of stories I've heard, right, from different people, because I always ask them, how do you get into Bitcoin and stuff? As soon as someone says, yeah, so I read the white paper, that's if there's many debates about what constitutes a Bitcoin OG, but at least as far as this podcast goes, the trend seems to be, if you got into it by I read the white paper, you must have been there early on, and I mean, now there's a lot of people that haven't read the white paper at all, right? But there's even a lot of people who have read the white paper, but they were, they found there's some other way into it, and then as they got into it, they kind of read the white paper. But back when the white paper was one of the few things you could read, that's kind of kind of a signal for how it is. And I always
Cheap Lightning and I were talking the other day about way back before Bitcoin, there'd be movies like Blade Runner or whatever, with the cred stick or something like that. And I remember as a kid, growing up, I was always like, that's total bullshit. That's so dumb. You could just copy it or whatever. That's such a dumb thing. You can't put money on a little piece of data. But then after you read the white paper, you're like, oh yeah, maybe you could, you could actually do that.
Yeah, and it's a crazy world that we live. I've got it in my Start Here guide on bitcoincashpodcast.com/start quick shill that talks about people have a strange idea or a hard time accepting that Bitcoin could be money, even though, like you're saying, they are used to the idea of anything being money, right? People play Monopoly and they don't bust out their wallets and get out real money. They just use fake money, which in the confines of the game, they accept as totally legitimate, right? Or they play a video game, and in a video game, people are always using gold in video game. Why are video games always about gold? Or they have, sci-fi credits, or in movies, right? Or you go to a different country. People are actually very accustomed, or they play poker and they use poker chips. People are very, very, very accustomed to the idea that anything can be money. Just Bitcoin seems to have a certain, for some reason, people have a aversion to it.
No, that wasn't it for me. It was I have an engineering background, and I was just like, this is dumb. It's just dumb, right? And I didn't know cryptography. I had never really studied cryptography at all. But then once you get the concept of the cryptography and one-way hashes and things like that, then you're like, oh, okay, I get it.
Well, that's also there's a lot of people these days. They don't necessarily like click with all those things. And I was thinking today actually a bit about that. I did just happen to be looking at the white paper a little bit, and the fact that it's elegant, right? It's beautiful. Satoshi's design, it just kind of covers everything, and I think that's why the white paper was so convincing to a lot of early Bitcoiners. It's not long, and it is a little bit technical, but on the other hand, there's a lot of depth to it the more you kind of sit with it. And I think
it's pretty ridiculous. Yeah.
You can.
It's one of those things that will be like anything else, like democracy, like internal combustion or whatever, the internet. It just becomes part of the fabric of things, and you don't even think about it. But when it first came out, it's like, oh, that's kind of a big deal. That's a huge change. Yeah, it'll be easy to forget.
Well, I mean, I have a theory that's an interesting point. Bitcoin will be easy to forget because it'll just become assumed. I mean, I have this theory that in 10 years or 30 years or in 50 years, maybe, that the Bitcoin white paper will become one of the most required readings for like sort of undergraduate university courses. I mean, university might end up getting abolished by online learning or whatever, but I could see it as being like a introduction to computer science, required reading firstly, but I could also see it the same in politics, in law, in philosophy, in psychology, maybe socioeconomics, as the kind of decentralization thing builds steam and as it integrates its way into more parts of the world. I can see that being identified as, look, this was the point, and you're going to have to understand these sort of incentive structures, economics, right? Like I can just see it. That's
not how history works. They'll attach Richard Hart to it and be like the inventor of Bitcoin, and you're like, what the?
maybe I don't know. The Bitcoin wife, that's already got quite a bit of momentum. But yeah, maybe you're right. Cheap Lightning, get in here, introduce yourself a little bit, or what do you do in the community? Obviously, you're on the previous episode of the show, but we got new listeners now. What do they need to know?
Please check out the previous episode where I said the exact same thing. I got. I guess my story is a little similar to John. I got into Bitcoin 2011. After first time I heard about Bitcoin, I thought, it's a scam. That's a scam. Just you can copy paste. It's never going to work. And then somebody published some article. I think it was in Wired magazine or Hacker News or something. Said, Bitcoin is the most disruptive technology we've ever seen, and I was like, okay, I'll look a little bit closer, and same thing. I read the white paper, and I was like, this is got some legs to it, I've been an online merchant since about 2008 or so, At that time, it just, totally scratched an itch for me. I didn't have to deal with PayPal or the bank or, any of these other things. I can just get money directly from my customers. and I don't have to worry about chargebacks and all these other things. And it totally just made sense. At the time, I was able to mine using GPUs. That's how early it was. ASICs weren't even out yet. They were talking about was FPGA or FAGP, whatever those flexible programmable graphic arrays or whatever they're called. Thank you. And yeah, at the time, I did the safe thing. I bought GPUs because I thought, well, if this Bitcoin thing dies, at least I'll have some nice GPUs I can use to game with. Yeah, I just it didn't die quickly, and so I bought some more GPUs, and I think at most I had 5 going at once.
Wow.
Yeah, and then got got scammed multiple times by some of the very first original Bitcoin scams. Got goxed, some mining company scam, Cryptsy, Butterfly Labs, the whole range. And then I took a break for a while because I was a little bit disheartened.
No shit.
Right.
Yeah.
But at that point, I thought, okay, Gox was kind of the final straw after all the scams, and I thought, okay, well, this is either going to be the nail in the coffin or it isn't, and so I'll let the devs do something, and
Devs, please. Can devs do something? Yeah.
Can devs do something? Yeah. Exactly. I'll let the devs do something. I'll let them try and figure this out. And of course, it wasn't the devs that did anything, but I just, I really thought, okay, well, if this is going to die, it's probably going to die now. And I'll just let it go for a while and see what happens. But of course, I still accepted it in my store, and there was still a trickle of customers who wanted to pay in Bitcoin, and I only accepted Bitcoin. Yeah, it was smooth sailing until, I guess, I could check, but 2016 or 15 or so. When I got an email from a customer who said, why are you charging such high fees? And I said, what are you talking about? Because up until that point, every Bitcoin transaction I'd ever made didn't register, like the fees, like you set it to minimum, like it was, or nothing. You literally could set it to nothing and it would still get in. And so I was like, oh, I'm sorry, maybe my settings are wrong. And, maybe the plugin, didn't update or something. But no, it was, Bitcoin was broken. And that's when I started getting into the debate, just reading what was going on. Of course, at that time, I didn't think, I'm just a merchant. I can't do anything. I have no influence. I ran a full node, but other than that, I wasn't. I'd stopped mining ages ago. It wasn't profitable anymore. I just started looking into things and thinking, like, how did we get here? It became very clear to me right away that something was rotten. When the split happened, it was pretty obvious to me which way I wanted to go, which was, the ideology of what Bitcoin is supposed to be, which is money for the world. And it had already been demonstrated to me that it was the path that we were on at that point was not the path that was going to be a success as far as peer-to-peer electronic cash. And that's the only thing I cared about was money for the world. So that's my history. As far, I don't want to, sorry, go ahead.
Well, I just was going to comment that it's funny when you said, oh, I got scammed by some of these earlier scams. And I was thinking back to those scams and I thought, wow, the scams have really got a lot more sophisticated these days. Yeah. Like as the scene has got better, the scams have got better too, Back then, crypto investors now, they would just breeze straight past the scams of old because they wouldn't be convincing. But that was the whole scene was shitty back then. So, you know, it was in parallel, right? That the actual legit stuff was kind of crap and the scams were kind of crap. So you had having a hard time figuring out what was what. And now the legit stuff is better, but the scams are better. So it's still the same problem.
Oh yeah.
Well, it's like the scams. They're almost like a trial of passage, like the white paper, right? Like, you know, somebody's actually been using crypto if they've been scammed at some point, right? Like if you haven't, you're like, you probably haven't actually been using crypto.
It's like my computer science,
right? You start to get your kind of mental immune system built up. Like, okay, there are people out there who just constantly will try to scam you. So.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's like my computer science teacher said, there's two kinds of people out there, those who have lost data and those who will lose data. And I feel the same about crypto in general now, is there's two kinds of people, those who have been scammed and those who will be scammed.
It's more, you've been cloistered, right, by whatever things that are supposed to protect you or whatever, but it really, you kind of realize later on, you're like, oh, I was extremely naive about, you know, how things actually work. And it's, I don't know, it feels much better to be aware that, okay, there's, you know, you have to be aware, you have to keep your wits about you. You can't just, you know, assume somebody's going to take care of you all the time. So yeah, it sucks, but it feels better later to understand.
You learn
how things actually work, right? Yeah.
But it teaches best. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, you got to get burned one way or another. But anyway, you push through to the other side, and here we all are today, nice and happy. So it all worked out for the best. Onto the price. On the way down this week, crypto markets have been kind of a bit low after the UST blow up. But that said, it also hasn't been the end of the world. It's been bad, but you know, to be honest, I would say in hindsight that the crypto markets have held up better than I expected, and I think I would attribute that partly to the fact that crypto, is just slowly maturing, and slowly there is more and more people who avoid each scam, even quite big ones. But on the other hand, also it seems like the UST blow up might have been, even though there was obviously retail investors caught up in it, seemed to have been a large chunk of institutions who were busy, you know, pouring their billions in there. And it's the same thing, right? Even if somebody's in charge of $20 billion, that doesn't mean they're an experienced crypto investor. It just meant they happened to be the guy in the Wall Street office or whatever who had access to the 20 billion, and they, you know, go all in on UST 2, and then 2 days later they're shit out of luck, and like, you know. So anyway, the USD 1 BCH $183, 1 BTC buys 160 BCH, so big ratio there at the moment. And Monero, I want to give a special shout out to the Monero community. Flipped BCH this week very briefly for like less than a day, but you know, in the war for legitimate peer-to-peer cash contenders, they did get up there for the first time ever. But BCH now,
the first time,
but I believe so. I think this is the first time that that's happened. Is it not?
I'm sure, I have no idea.
I think it is, but you know,
maybe we were all just higher before, or like maybe we were all in the top 10 before, and that's just what I remember. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, BCH, you know, was like got highest at number 3, and even when I started this show, actually, it's funny. You watch the first episode, we're at number 9, but then when you look at the top, like the ones that are above us now, I mean, there's a lot of junk in there, like. When you look back at those old coin market cap rankings, even from a year ago or something, you're like, oh man. And then you look now and you look at the 2017 ones, you're like, half of these coins are gone. And that's another thing people really don't understand, I don't think, you know, about. That's one of the part of getting scammed, right? You got to know, is my money going to be here literally in 3 years if I just fucked off today and left it in there? When I came back, would this still be a thing? You know, in the top 50, there's probably like less than 10, maybe like 7 or 8 projects that you could actually reliably expect that from, I'd say. I don't know.
It's funny. I don't want to get into talk about BTC or whatever, but that's actually one of the things I challenge people with when they're like, Lightning Network would totally serve the purpose of a general purpose scaling for BTC, and I'm like, I'll bet you any amount you want, to leave your money, take $100,000, take $1 million, put it on Lightning Network, and just leave it there and walk away and don't look back. You won't do it. Nobody will do that, right?
Put your money
Even
where
if
your
the
mouth
network's
is.
still there, your money may not be there.
Yeah, skin in the game. That's it. And I guess that's another. It's funny because that actually links back to what you were saying about the cryptography, which is the fundamental idea once you drill into it a bit, that private keys are just numbers, right? And so
right.
even as much as people might have changed and upgraded, Bitcoin since the early days, and with hard forks and all these kind of different things being enabled and disabled and stuff, the fact is your private keys are still your private keys, and they forever will be, right? Nobody's going to be changing that around.
Just set some news alerts for quantum, cryptography, and then call it a day, and you'll be all right.
Even that, you'd probably be okay, because presumably once we get that kind of stuff on the horizon, the community is obviously going to fork in some kind of defense against it, and they have to do it in a way that, like, almost certainly, maybe not, it'll depend what happens, but almost certainly it would be in a way that would protect people who didn't move their coins, because everybody knows, like, there's so many people with their coins in cold storage, and then what if Satoshi's coins get taken out by quantum computing? Everyone will be like, that's a bit dog, like, Satoshi should still have their coins. No,
I'm not sure there's much you can do about that except for freezing old coins, but I don't know.
What do you mean adding quantum resistance? Isn't there's ways you can upgrade it, right, to have more quantum resistance without screwing up the existing addresses? Like, if we change the addresses from the Bitcoin format to the BCH format, I know that's not exactly the same, right? But it shows that you could add another layer in there, kind of thing.
I'm not sure. Maybe. I'm not thought about it.
Not a problem we have to deal with quite yet. Next slide is the transactions, which have been down a little bit this week. BCH has dipped off a bit. It's been slowly growing from 45K up to about 70K over a few months, and has now dipped back down to 30K. I was a bit surprised by this, but then it seems that not a lot of sort of, I don't want to say legitimate traffic, but like the transactions that have been lost, there hasn't been a huge shrink in the actual economy, because the active addresses and other sort of indicators of network traffic and whatever basically haven't really moved. So it seems like, if anything, there's been a loss of about 20,000, maybe noise.cash put in some slightly better batching, or somebody was testing some kind of microtransactions and they stopped doing it, or something like that. But the transaction number have dropped, but seemingly no actual, the economy is not shrinking, though, I don't think.
Has anyone checked other than Coindance? Maybe just their node. It just seems weird to me, right?
That could also be the case. Maybe that was it. I didn't even think to check another site, because it's now been like 3 or 4 days, so it seems legitimate to me. But I don't know. Maybe it could just be them. But John, tell me, do you follow on-chain metrics much? What do you think about that? Is it all voodoo, or is it useful, or is it in the middle somewhere? How do you treat assessing the crypto through the lens of on-chain stats?
I don't really look at those very much, right? Because I mean, to some degree, they're all very kind of distant proxies, right, for what's actually going on. And I think I don't know, from my perspective, when things are actually moving in a commerce, in terms of commerce and economy, it's going to be much more obvious that things are happening. I'm not sure that on-chain metrics will be necessary to know that it's happening. It'll be more like a measure of what's happening. So I don't know. For me, it feels like a little bit of a tea leaf reading, but I'm sure there's some interesting stuff going on in there. Like I saw the stuff going on yesterday with that, some consolidation, some crazy thing going on. Occasionally I see some people doing application testing that just throws transactions up. Yeah, so there's some interesting stuff in there, but I don't keep an eye on it.
Yeah. I think it's been personally. I enjoy
the numbers
on-chain.
I'm looking for are revenue and profit and, and
Yeah.
things like that, right?
Yeah, you
and
gotta be
whether
focused
Bitcoin
on the
Cash helps
company.
me to make those happen. So.
Yeah, and I think we're going to get into a bit of that in a minute. Is really how do you assess the success of your currency? And I think different cryptocurrencies, both individuals obviously have different takes according to their own whims and experience and background and whatever, but different communities also look for very different things as to whether like we are doing a good job, right? Famously, BTC, it's a lot about the price, right? If the price is going up, then that means the market's telling us we're doing great, even if retail adoption is plunging, for instance. Or like with Ethereum, they love this metric: are we burning more ETH? If we're burning more ETH, gosh, we are the most in demand crypto, even if fees are going up, or even if there's more and more Ethereum killers, or even if the merge takes longer, right? So there's all kinds of different metrics, and I think we'll talk about the ones the BCH community finds important in a sec.
So,
but go on.
If I could make a metric, right? Because I've talked about this a lot with people in the past, is how much actual commerce is done with BCH would be the metric that I would want to know. And of course, you can't just extract that from blockchain data, but that would be the number that I would want to know. How much actual commerce is done?
But that's even a bit vague. So specify that a bit more. Is that how many genuine people are buying like a physical good? How many people are buying a digital good? If I'm sending money to an exchange to swap it into a token and flick money around and gamble, does that count? Is that actual commerce? Like, what do you mean by actual commerce?
So I guess it would be sending to an exchange certainly wouldn't count. Making an actual exchange with someone on chain would count. When the actual coins have moved from person A to person B, whether the exchange does that or you do it yourself, P2P, like that would be something. When a business pays its employees with crypto, when business A pays business B for something in their supply chain, when somebody purchases something, that kind of thing. Anything that's part of commerce, between two parties that otherwise they have to do some kind of exchange, some kind of deal. When money changes there, that's real money moving. So
yeah, that's economic activity. Yeah, so we've got on the next slide, then there's the cent in USD, which I'd like to also keep an eye on, because I agree it's a very poor proxy for it, really. But combining that with the transaction, at least you get a bit of a sense of what's going on. So this week the cent in USD is down for both BCH and BTC, which I think really is an indicator like that the markets have been a little bit quiet and a little bit on the decline. People have been a bit more, negative, a bit more pessimistic. And so, the actual commerce that goes on sort of regardless of whether the price is up or down for the most part, is maybe in the floor underneath that. But some of the more speculative stuff tends to drop off when the market isn't heating up, because everybody has to go back to their real life and get a job or whatever, right? So
I wonder how this is measured.
It's how much so you can take like how many satoshis basically move on each chain multiplied by the USD price on that day, or I guess maybe they even do it by the USD amount, per transaction. At this transaction at this time, the price was X. But obviously, since they're UTXO chains, it's also measuring change outputs as well too. So that can be.
So it doesn't attempt to filter out change or something like it doesn't.
Not as far as I know. No. Huh. That's probably a separate metric.
It's hard to believe with. It's hard to believe with Cash Fusion that it's gone down. Cash Fusion does a ridiculous amount of volume. Interesting. Okay.
Well, this is in the log view, but if you look on the all-time chart, there was basically a period where BCH, it was very long too. It was like more than a year, where it went from a couple 100 million a day up to like 4 or 5 billion, and it stayed there for about a year, and then it's dropped off, except for you can see this spike here in February. It dropped off at the end of January and then spiked again in February, and then it hasn't been back. But there's some kind of exchange whale or somebody who was doing 5 billion of sent in BCH a day that came and went without really anybody noticing. Well, obviously we can see on these charts, right? But it's not like the ecosystem was like, oh wow, this huge company collapsed or whatever.
Right.
So we're still, I don't know if Coinbase stopped aggregating their BCH wallets every single day or something. Like, I don't know.
Right.
Still a mystery that I'm hoping one day we'll find out the answer to, but I don't really hold out much hope for that. All right. So first topic of the day then is how many Bitcoin Cash users are there? And also by extension, how many Bitcoin users are, and I guess even how many crypto users are, but for Bitcoin BTC is the one I want to compare to. And the reason is because we had a viewer sort of write in a bit and say, look, Jeremy's been asked a couple of times how many Bitcoin Cash users are there, and basically doesn't have a very good answer. I'm always pretty vague about it. Like, well, I don't really know. Who knows, And they sort of said, no, look, you can look at these stats and, here's some ideas. So I sort of wanted to dig into it a bit. And I think it is a good question, because we're certainly at a point in crypto where it seems it's not niche anymore. It's sort of on the edge of mainstream. But on the other hand, it's also not mainstream. It's also not that easy to tell whether how many people are like, oh yeah, I've heard of crypto and they don't have any, or how many people have heard of crypto but actually they've got $5 or they've got 500 or they've got 20% of their net worth in there cheekily, but without really making a big fuss out of it, right? It's kind of a hard thing to tell. So the reason that I am always very vague about this is because how you measure users is not a simple matter, right? Do you look at the price, the daily transactions, the active addresses, other kinds of blockchain analysis? Do you look at payment provider stats, like podcast downloads, Twitter hashtags? Do you go to meetups and do you survey people? Do you just like guess off what you feel? And I also want to make the point that the other reason is you have to be very specific about what counts as a user, right? If I am a Bitcoin maximalist and I buy a huge chunk of my net worth into Bitcoin and then I put it in my cold wallet or I even leave it on Coinbase and it just sits there for 5 years, am I a crypto user? Well, in one sense, yes. If I'm hodling and I have the keys and I'm storing my value or whatever, I'm speculating, yes, I'm a user. But on the other hand, am I actually using it day to day? Am I trading with it? Am I paying people? No, I'm still in the fiat economy, basically, right? So how do you deal with that? What about like how many Bitcoin Cash users very specifically is an interesting one, because Bitcoin Cash would be, I would think, probably definitely by ratio and maybe even by absolute numbers, the community that has the most former members of the community, right? There's huge numbers of people who've been in Bitcoin Cash and have floated out of the scene, either on a different fork with eCash or BSV, or they just went back to fiat for a while because they kind of thought crypto is really scammy, or they got interested in another chain or whatever. There's so many people that are in the sort of ex BCH community that could come back at any time and they would instantly be plugged in if they were convinced for whatever reason, right? So are they users? They're users in spirit, or they were in the past and they could be tomorrow, but are they today? Like, I don't know how many. So what do you think? What do you make of all of this? How many?
I think it depends on how, for the original use case, right, which is peer-to-peer cash. It would obviously be like we just said, economic activity, right?
Mm.
If you're actually doing economic activity with it, paying somebody, doing some kind of speculation with somebody, you know, whether that's against a liquidity provider in an exchange or peer-to-peer or whatever, or you know, you're paying somebody with it. Those are all the actual measures of users. Those are actual users of it, right? They're getting some utility from it. It's like somebody in my family said to me once, like once they saw the thing in Canada where some fundraiser was getting canceled, right? And they're like, "Oh, you can't do that. You can't give your money to this person." And then they were like, "What?" And then they contacted me and they were like, "Hey, so this Bitcoin Cash thing, like, you would just go to a store and pay for stuff with it?" And I'm like, yeah, that's the idea.
Yeah.
Yes, you would just use it like money. And they're like, huh. You know, like that's a big step because the speculation has become so ingrained. But yes, somebody getting utility from it, whether it's speculation or something else, but it's just so hard to measure. And that's for us, right? But for I won't say Ethereum, right? I'll say DeFi, because there's still like the kind of OG Ethereum people who have a certain vision, even if sometimes it's kind of comical, like the world computer type thing. And then there's the DeFi gang on Ethereum and all the EVMs. And for them, right, it's like you said, people are speculating and using it in contracts and things like that. So yeah, is there actual economic activity going on there? Yeah, I think so. It's a very extremely narrow type of activity, but it's there. So yeah, whatever it is where two people are making an actual exchange of value. So
So take a guess. Worldwide, in the last, let's say, in the last month, how many Bitcoin Cash users would you say there are? It's a very hard question, right?
No clue. No clue.
Well, because I was thinking about this in the lead up to this show. I don't know that I have an answer. And this is Zone Crypto asked in the chat, is BCH being at number 24 or 25 in the market cap a concern? And the answer is no, not really, because of this exact thing that we're talking about here. The metric that matters to me in a crypto is how many real users are there, as in people who understand how to hold their own crypto, the vision of becoming peer-to-peer cash, and where possible, I guess, or to the extent that it can, you know, fit into their life, making direct crypto payments to people. And you can, if you ranked the coin market cap by that metric, the list would be completely different to what it is now, right? Whether you did it by percentage or even by absolute total, you know, numbers, Monero, Bitcoin Cash, Dash would just rocket up the list, and just so much other stuff would be just completely out of there instantly. But even like Tether, you know, things like that would probably still be quite high up at the top. But a lot of the other ones, you know, Solana and Cardano and whatever, they're all out of there. And, you know, in a bear market, you see those projects kind of crumble and fall apart a bit at the seams. So I was thinking, you know, what is the answer? Like in the last month, well, clearly 1,000 is too low, and clearly like 10 million, I would say, is too many, right? So I'm just trying to sort of narrow it down in that range. 10,000 also probably too low, wrong order of magnitude. 100,000, okay, maybe. Have 1 million people use BCH in the last month? Probably not, right? So I feel like it's between maybe in the lower end of the 100,000 to million range. I don't know. Thoughts?
So
I don't
I have maybe
go
a
ahead.
somewhat depressing answer to that, which is that we're what, 12 years on now since the creation of Bitcoin, 13, 12, something.
13 years,
And and has it really hit its stride? I don't think it's hit its stride at all yet, honestly. In speculation, it's kind of hit its stride with EVMs, right? With people being able to financialize all kinds of aspects. It's really interesting. There's a lot of complexity to it. It's just personally not very interesting because of the nature of EVM and how it's more or less only useful for very wealthy people and institutions now, for the most part, right? Like you can't really, regular person who puts $10 on there can't do anything, right? Even on the alternative EVMs, for the most part. But yeah, but besides that financialization speculation aspect, I really don't think crypto has hit its stride. And that's something that I don't know, I think all the ecosystems who are serious about, actually being used and not just existing because of some kind of bubble, I think all coins and networks that are serious should be taking that extremely seriously, right? Like what's going on? Why haven't we hit our stride yet? I think that's a hard question to answer.
Well, I think the more time sort of plays out of doing this podcast and stuff, the more I am really beginning to just see it as it's just we're just running it back, basically, that the 2013, which was when I joined, but maybe even a little earlier than that, maybe the sort of late 2012 kind of era through to 2017, we're just replaying that block of time, at least in the BCH community, starting after the eCash fork, right? Once again, you had a small community of, like probably in the, 100,000 type range of people, maybe a little lower, maybe a little higher. Certainly back in the day with Bitcoin, it would have been lower, absolute numbers, but the conviction would have been higher. And now it's, there might be more people like, who are aware of BCH in the general sense, but BCH people who are actually in it, we're trying to make peer-to-peer cash, every single day, maybe roughly similar kind of numbers. And even though things have changed a lot in terms of the outside regulatory landscape, how aware people are of the idea, all the exchange infrastructure, even though those things have changed massively between then and now, in some senses, we're still kind of at the same place in terms of real merchant adoption, people trading peer-to-peer, even the on-chain metrics are quite similar. The active addresses is about, getting to about 100,000 a day, which is about what Bitcoin was doing in 2013, early 2014 type of range. So I'm just getting that deja vu sense, and the community feels to me very similar like it did then, but maybe that's just me.
There's also the question of timing, right? When the time is not right, sometimes things just don't, people don't feel the pressure or the incentive. But when your government, which you trust or not to whatever degree, tries to shove a CBDC, a central bank digital currency, down your throat and tells you, oh, by the way, now everything you do by law needs to be tracked by this. They won't say it that way, but people will get it, right? That's what's actually going on. And you can't really use that paper money anymore. We're gonna, give you CBDC currency for whatever you turn in. yeah, and for your children, they'll never have paper. It'll only be this. It'll only be provided. Like once that kind of thing starts to take off and that pressure starts to appear, then the whole question, that I was telling you, my family member said, like, oh, you'll actually just pay for things with it, like cash. I'm like, yes, just like cash, right? Once this other pressure is there, then maybe that will be the right time for it, when people will actually see, oh, okay, so having an alternative money, this is actually a really valuable thing. So it's possible that the timing will make a difference also.
Well, I think that was certainly an element of the original Bitcoin surge and stuff, such as it was, is there's
the bailout.
There was the banking GFC and the sort of ramifications, which did sort of linger on for a few years, right? Certainly into like 2011, it was still kind of going on a bit. And, in the following years after that, people were still very aware. It was still very in people's minds. But then given long enough, things change, things fade. A new generation, grew up who maybe weren't as exposed to that kind of thing. And it's not really in their, zeitgeist as much, or whatever, right? Things do change a little bit. And at that time, the Bitcoin BTC, or I can't call them the Bitcoin BTC, but the Bitcoin community was so strongly enthusiastic and so motivated, and so like, we're making it happen, and everybody was on the same page, even though things degenerated into the block size war. Certainly before all the online shilling and the divisive stuff started, everybody was like, peer-to-peer cash, like, we're fucking doing it. And I can see that same thing is starting to happen a bit in Bitcoin Cash. It's very, very exciting. And I think certainly if we have a conference at the end of this year with Bitcoin Cash 2022 that Mark Felson is trying to put together in St. Martin's, I think if there's something like that, and out of that comes a bunch of footage of just people like with a bunch of stalls and everybody just trading Bitcoin and just having a good time, that will just ignite a lot of that sense of like, wow, we actually can still do it, even because that's not anywhere else essentially in the crypto space. I mean, there's been El Salvador, and I had Jenny on the show last week. She was talking a bit about El Zonte, but even from that, there hasn't been a lot of footage of just here's a bunch of people just trading Bitcoin and stuff. I mean, I'm sure there is a little bit, and it seems like there is here or there a sort of lightning transaction going on, but there just hasn't been, look, here's just me doing a live stream as I walk around it for 10 minutes and just everybody's trading crypto. Hasn't happened.
Well,
right?
the bailout, another timing issue is the bailout, right, was it's so galling because of what happened to the banks and how the money was spent and where the money came from, right? The whole inflation and printing of money to bail banks out, whatever, whether you think it was a good idea or a bad idea, that money came out of inflation, right? And that was part of the motivation for it. And you want to talk about inflation, right? Like the potential for inflation right now is exponentially higher than it was in 2008, 2007, right? Like back in the day. So yeah, the timing pressure may have multiple things going on right now that are much greater than they were in the past, so that utility actually increases, right? Because as long as you have this extremely stable thing called the dollar, that's what people use, whether it's an electronic version or like back when I was a kid, when it was the paper version that people are trading on the gray market or on the black market on the corner of their neighborhood in other countries, right? Like the dollar was extremely valuable. But if that goes away also, right, then the utility starts to become enormous, where it's like, oh wait, well, we're still looking for the stable thing. What is the stable thing? And it's certainly not stable coin.
Yeah, cheap lightning, get in there.
I don't know what I can add to that. Yeah, I think the spring is coiling up. As John said, inflation. The previous Bitcoin boom was really inspired by the Lehman shock, right? And I don't think we've seen the worst of our current situation. I don't think I think the pebble has been dropped in the pond, but I think the ripples haven't been felt yet. And just starting, there's the whole baby formula thing, and all of the shipping that's backed up all around the world. And I don't know if you've made it, online orders recently, but shipping is fucked. I have a lot of personal experience with international shipping, and I can honestly say it's just fucked right now. It's just absolutely wrecked. And I was looking at ordering some plastic bags to wrap things that I had ordered many times. This is just an anecdotal, example. But I couldn't get them, and the distributor I bought them from couldn't get the material to make them, and they, it's just all of these supply chain ripples are just going to be felt more and more and worse and worse. And coming out of that, we'll definitely see some financial changes. I'm not going to try and pretend what those are going to be, right? But once you print all this money, well, people are going to feel it one way or the other. Can governments around the world hold back that shock long enough to get some other system in place, or whatever the plan is that we're not privy to? I have no idea. But at the same time, I have zero trust or faith in those systems, and for a myriad of other reasons, I am interested in an alternative and parallel economy, which is why I spend my all of my time all day, every day, working on BCH stuff in the community and with people. I don't know what else I can say.
Well, it's
yeah.
I mean, it's certainly a grim take, but it's true. It's true, and I think the funny thing about all of this decentralization and so forth is that reality is decentralized, right? One of my favorite sayings is from Ayn Rand, who said, you could ignore reality, but you can't ignore the consequences of ignoring reality. And that's essentially where we're at, right? I could obviously, listeners to this show will be more likely to have their finger on the pulse of this issue, but I can also confidently feel like people do listen in from all around the world genuinely, and they will be able to see it almost certainly going on in their local area. So today I noticed the price of Subway had gone up for the second time in about 6 months, right? That's never happened before. Like, maybe they raise their prices even once a year, like a tiny little bit, but it's gone up twice, significantly. Maybe how many percent? Let's see. Maybe like nearly 5 or 10% twice in under 6 months, maybe four or 5 months even. And just, I wouldn't be surprised if there's another one before the end of the year, right? And that people do notice that the inflation story is becoming big. And so when I look at the crypto markets and they're just down a little bit, it's, people could easily be like, oh no, my crypto's getting wrecked, inflation's but the thing is, you just got to wait. Like, that's it. You still have the exact same number of BCH, the same percentage slice of that 21 million as you had yesterday, but the percentage of dollars, pounds, euros, whatever, Australian dollars, just it's all fading away to nothing. And yeah, that's...
Jeremy, let me jump in for a second. Maybe your slice doesn't go down, but really, unless it's helping people, unless it's actually being useful to somebody, and then there's no foundation for that value in the first place, right? And you asked earlier, like, why I got into Bitcoin. One of the things that is, I don't know if it's controversial, but sometimes I feel like it is that I don't necessarily want Bitcoin Cash, crypto, whatever, peer-to-peer money, this alternate money to just like destroy the legacy finance system, right? I don't think that's really it might happen. I don't think so. I don't think that'll be what happens, right? But what I do think, and one of the things that really motivated me to actually do something and not just sit there and be like, hey, maybe the number will go up, is that I think it serves as competition for money. Because right now what we have is a very synchronized fiat standard all over the world, right? You cannot escape it. Unless you live in like some community that has isolated itself and works on gold or something like that. Like, I don't know. Like, barter. You cannot escape the fiat standard. Yeah, barter. Yeah, you can't escape it. And that's bad, right? Monoculture is dangerous and it's not robust. And it can start to believe its own propaganda and so forth, right? That monoculture is almost always very dangerous. So another way of looking at it is just that, there's an alternative. Like you said, an alternative, like Cheap Lightning said, an alternative economy. There's an alternative there. And some people are going to use it. And just the fact of that, whether it's huge or small, is going to anchor to some degree the legacy finance system, right? And be like, oh, okay, we can't let our fantasy go too far. We gotta bring it back just a little bit, right? Because as long as everybody, the way I put it, like as long as everybody's floating together, like up into the stratosphere, it looks normal because everybody else is up there. But as soon as there's this anchor down on the ground, you're like, hey guys, it's pretty dangerous up
Going
there.
further and further away.
You're
Yeah.
really high up there. Right? So
You
the
need
anchor,
oxygen.
that alternative, yeah, you need oxygen actually. So that provides an alternative, and I think that's very important to have that competition. And a lot of people think it's silly, but yeah, you know, democracy was a stupid idea back in the day, right? When it emerged as a political system, it was absolutely idiotic. People thought, you know, the kings and queens and nobles and all of their follow-ons said it was such a terrible idea. It was stupid. You can't depend on the people for things, but obviously it's been dominant over those. So yeah, having that alternative there and having the possibility of disruption happening is really important, and I think we provide that. And as long as we take it seriously and keep building it and actually make it so that you can build an alternative economy on it, and we do build some level of alternative economy, that's really important just to be there. So yeah.
I mean, I'm kind of I'm maybe a bit more aggressive than you in the sense that I'm not here to play nice. I don't think we should be just like, well, we're the nice little, you know, the kind of, the sense that, okay, everyone can be having a great time in the, you know, on the Titanic, as long as the life raft is there, at least a few people will be thinking, oh, what would we do in the case of an emergency? Like, I think it's more of an attack. We're coming in. We're playing a win.
I want people to move over, but I guess what I didn't say is there's probably people listening or people who look at crypto and they're like, oh, these guys, they're silly. These people are silly because they think they're just going to take over and replace the whole financial system. And it's like, well, maybe, but that's not even necessarily the point, right? Like nothing starts as big as its thing that it's disrupting, right? Absolutely nothing starts that large, right? When Amazon started, it was a joke compared to the existing physical bookstores, right? It was an absolute joke. People were like, this is dumb. I knew lots of people who said, this is the dumbest thing. Why in the hell would you buy a book online? That's ridiculous. And so nothing starts as big as its competition, as what it's disrupting. But yeah, it's not that you have to take over the world immediately, but being there, being competition is the first step. If you don't do that, if you're not actually providing an alternative and something valuable, then yeah. So that's what I love about Bitcoin Cash ecosystem is we have that laser focus on providing utility and making it useful to everybody, not just to the people who can afford, you know, whatever $1,000 fees or 50 or whatever.
Yeah. And I think as time goes on, people really need to reflect on and understand, you know, what you're saying there about we're trying to compete with the global financial system. And so, yeah, obviously we aren't there right now. Nobody will say that we are, you know, not even the most. That's the most interesting thing about it is crypto skeptics will sort of say, oh, you guys and your joke or your Ponzi scheme or like whatever way they can find to marginalize or ridicule or criticize, point out the flaws. But crypto people never say back to them, yeah, like we've got it all the answers. But they are saying, well, at least we're making a run at it. Like, what are you doing? Where's your, okay, you don't like crypto, and maybe even some of you can at least be intellectually honest enough to sort of admit there is some problems with the existing financial system. So what are you doing? You're, you know, if you've got it's not a problem unless you've got a solution, right? That's another saying that I really like, right? If you're not providing any alternative, then who are you to come and tell us if we're doing a shit job? Because like, are you helping out? No. Where's your entry in the free market, you know?
Yeah, and there's a difference between people who are kind of out there and thinking, oh, crypto is going to solve everything, right? It's a silver bullet. It's ambrosia. It's gonna fix all the problems. Obviously not, right? But it can certainly be part of making things better. So yeah, I think it's really rare, right, to actually have a chance to work on something that can actually make a difference. It's
right.
I mean, how many people in history have had an actual chance to do that? Seems like a privilege to me.
I couldn't agree more. I think, I look at all the problems in the world and, everything's connected to money in some way, and how entrenched all the legacy systems are, and how, we're not allowed to participate unless you get permission from various levels and agencies and even just getting a bank account here in Japan, like excuse me, my first time they're like no, you can't. It's like, why not, right? It's like, oh, we're not going to give you permission to give us your money. It's just all of these ridiculous things, and it's like, well, yeah, I could try and go through the old process and try and become, king of the world and change everything. Or we can start from scratch and we can try and build something new, something better with all of the combined experience of all the people that have come before us. Okay, we have, I don't know how many years, 1,000 years of commerce as it's been. We got a lot of great lessons there. Now we have an opportunity to start fresh, start slow, and build something that's better with the tools that are available to us today, right? So,
yeah, and I mean, there is this kind of crypto skeptic argument that I'm seeing a bit more, these sort of memes of like, libertarians discover, how the world got to the point that it is and stuff like that. And it is true that, of course, crypto is just reinventing the wheel and sort of discovering some of the same problems that we've had before. But I think the critical difference is crypto finds some of the same problems that it had before, but it looks for a different solution, in the same way that when you're a kid and you grow up, well, you have the same problems that your parents had, right? But you also think about them. You don't just do what your parents did, because they were living in a different time, a different age. They had, different environment. They had different tools available to them or whatever. And so the solution they come up with their life problems is not going to be the same solution you're going to have, even though it's the same problem, right? But times have changed, and you've got both the benefit of having seen how their solution worked out, as well as, new opportunities and things that didn't exist, or, the world has just moved on. And so, yeah, crypto is reinventing parts of the financial system, but we're critically not reinventing others, or we're changing it. We're doing something different. And I think that's, to me, that's just super important. And people who can't see those fine distinctions and just resort to a very easy attack on it are the exact ones who, at the end of the day, when they finally find some reason that it appeals to them, or it provides them a solution because there's nothing else left, I wonder how much humility we're going to get. Probably not a lot. I mean, that's classic humans, but
touching on that, I'd like to, stress one thing. It's like, money is going to evolve. We've
Right.
seen it with the letter. We've seen it with music. We've seen it with movies, right? Money is going to evolve. And so what do you want? Do you want the legacy financial stewards to create their version of digital money, or would you like some new alternative that isn't burdened by all of those legacy what should I say, anchors that pull you to the bottom of the ocean that we've been dealing with until now? So given a choice, I'd much rather have an alternative that isn't created by the same people that have fucked us.
Yeah,
You've got the
and
mixed
just
metaphors
competition,
going,
right?
yeah.
Like whether that's Bitcoin Cash or Monero or whatever, having
Sure.
competition is huge. It's fantastic. I love it.
Well, that's certainly something that no crypto can get away from. Is the fact of the matter is, in the crypto marketplace, cutthroat is pretty brutal and intense, and there's no insulating you from that. And that's something I also think about a little bit too, is that crypto does have a bit more of the sense of somebody can come into crypto, or who's big on it or whatever. If they don't like a coin, they can go to another coin, because there might be another coin, or there probably is another coin that is doing things the way they like to do it. And if dissent or unhappiness festers in a community, there is the possibility of you can fork the chain, or you can make a new open source copy and start it from scratch, or you can do that kind of thing. But the beautiful thing about it is, by having that power, you also basically have that responsibility, which is, it's very easy to sit on the sidelines and criticize one community or another community for the way they're doing things. But unless your community is absolutely crushing them on that metric, you don't have much to stand on, because behind the scenes, there's always a lot more to, the way any one given thing has been done. Like the classic is, I think the ETH killers, really, that Ethereum has a lot of problems and so on and so forth. But the ETH killers, okay, it's good that they're competing with it. But on the other hand, they sort of don't recognize what ETH has done to get to where it has, and that they aren't, and they can't just catch up overnight either. There's a lot of high powered thinking along that line of crypto that isn't actually so easy to replicate.
I love all the competition. It's messy and it's kind of complicated. And I think looking back, in the history books of the future, it'll be like, so back then they had this thing where the place that you lived, like the actual land that you lived on, determined what money you had to use. And it'll be like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And you didn't even have an option. Like, you couldn't even do it. It would be like, you had to do all this complicated process to get somebody else's money, and then you wouldn't be able to use it. Oh my God, that's so funny. Like, they were so silly and simple back then, right? So I look forward to that. Like, whatever the hell is going to happen. I think, there's no such thing as only forward or improving progress, right? But I think it's going to improve with this, with competition, and like Cheap Lightning said, with the evolution of money. I think it's going to make things better.
Yeah. Okay. So let's, on the next slide here, then, on this subject of how many users I got this sort of analysis, and maybe we can tie this into everything we've been talking about as to what different communities kind of value in crypto, right? Because it was sort of like, well, look, here's some analysis of how many crypto users there are, or BCH users there are. So they said, look, there's these stats, okay, 7 million addresses. They said wallets, but it's actually addresses. 7 million addresses have been holding for 1 to 12 months in the last 1 to 12 months since they were last moved, and then 14 million have been more than 1 year of hodling. And then you have a certain amount here. Let me just zoom in on this so I can actually read the stats that we had here. But anyway, the point is, I don't know, Jack, can you see those numbers? I'm just frantically trying to find out where. Here we go. Well, I can zoom in. Yeah, right. Okay, so 14 million hodlers. I got it. 14 million hodlers, hodling addresses basically on BCH. 7 million in between the last 1 to 12 months spending, and 723,000 are so-called traders who've spent their money in the last month, right? And so the idea is, okay, well, with that, we can maybe get a sense of how much of the economy is being, locked up in storage vaults, how much is people that are sort of in the market in the midterm, and how many are people trading and or just actually paying for goods and services, that real economy part of things that we were talking about. And so you can also sort of look at different currencies and find out whether or not, they were they have those ratios are in the same or different amount, and sort of speculate on whether a given community has more of a focus on hodling or more of a focus on commerce or more speculators or whatever. And then on the next slide, I have even more stats, and to make it clear exactly how difficult it is to really get a sense of how many people are in any given cryptocurrency, I took a bunch of stats that I thought could be relevant at comparing, the Bitcoin BTC and the Bitcoin BCH community, and how to look at what is the difference between them. What is basically the BTC community is always larger, but by how much, right? So on the price, it's about 160x difference, 30,000 USD to about 180 USD at the moment, obviously. Transactions per day, however, it's 300,000 for BTC and 50,000 for BCH. So that's only 6x. So even just in those two, you can see there's a huge, it's not proportional in any way. Active addresses per day, 800,000 for BTC, 80,000 for BCH. So about 10x. If we look at BitPay and their stats that they do on people paying with crypto at vendors, so more in that sort of actual commerce stat that we were talking about, 56% of their stuff at the moment is about on BTC and about 6.5% is on BCH. So that's about 8.5x advantage for BTC. Cash to VN, who do remittances, again, more sort of that real economy type vibe. BTC, they do about 22.5% of their transactions, and BCH is about 12%. So there, it's only a 2x. And then, so even when you're looking at these stats, it can be all over the place. And then you can go a bit more esoteric and you could say, okay, so what Bitcoin did was the biggest BTC podcast. They have 82,000 YouTube subs, right? This podcast has almost 1,000 YouTube subs. So you could say it's an 82x advantage there. But that's still not very meaningful, because there's a lot more Bitcoin BTC podcasts than BCH. There's this one, and there's Casual BCH. Shout out to Satoshi Nakamoto, who also has one, right? But there's about 100 Bitcoin BTC podcasts. So it's not really 1-to-1, but that's an 82x, right, on that very crude measure. Tweets per day, there's about 150,000 tweets per day apparently on Bitcoin BTC, and about 300 a day on BCH. So it's a 500x advantage, right? And just think about that. Think about all the people in all the different cryptos and all the no coiners and everything who are always tagging Bitcoin. That's pumping up their stats, right? And if you look on Reddit, right, the traditional stronghold of cryptocurrency communities are Bitcoin. 4.2 million BCH on RBTC has nearly 1 million. So there it's only 4.5x. So between this entire set of things, we've got anywhere between 500x and 2x difference between those two currencies. And so this is really all just for me to demonstrate, when the viewer was writing in how many people are in BCH, just look at this stat. It's not really that simple. It's kind of which stats you're looking at and which ones you choose to value. So I think it's really important, for the BCH community. And one of the reasons I think the BCH community is doing great at the moment, at least, is because the things that I tend to value are indicators of that real adoption happening. So merchant outlets taking it is a big one, especially if there's, videos and promotional marketing material around it. If there is detectable community discussion, no matter how small it is, whether it's on Twitter or on Reddit or on podcasts or whatever, of people driving towards that actual mission. And if there's a lack of concern or outcry when the price drops, that's also, I think, a hugely fantastic signal for crypto. And like I said, Monero flipped over to BCH, and nobody there was one post on RBTC, but between the BCH and the Monero communities, there was not suddenly a lot of antagonism. Whereas two other cryptos, if one flips the other and they're both very price focused, suddenly people are all up in each other's grills, arguing back and forth about this.
Vitalik did that back in the day also. When BCH flipped Ethereum for like a day or something like that, he was like, "Oh, good job." That was it. That was the extent of it. Similar with Monero. Like, okay, nice.
Yeah. Good job, guys. Keep going.
Hey, I want to ask a question about this. Because the two that are most meaningful to me, obviously, since I was seeing economic activity and commerce, are the BitPay and the cash to be in here. But is the BitPay, is that the percent of the number of transactions or the amount? Do you know for sure?
I think it's the number of transactions. So if they had 100, when 100 people pay with BitPay, 56 of them use BTC and 6.5 use BCH.
Yeah. I'd like to know for sure.
You can look it up. It's bitpay.com/stats, and you can look at it. And they even have some like a graph of the which ones are going up and down over time. But it's also kind of annoying because they delete, like they only go back the history a few months, and in the previous months they do just like hide them, or maybe sometime we should just petition them and say, hey, can we have the full graphs or something? I don't know why they don't just publish them all, but yeah, well, and the same
Okay,
with
yeah,
the
you're
cash
right.
to
It's
VN.
the count. It's the count, not the amount. Yeah, that's
But
right.
and that's also where it's quite again, stats can lie in a million ways, right? Like with BitPay, they have these stats, but fascinatingly, the BitPay company is not growing. Like their payments per month has been about 65 to 70K for like years. I think at this point, it would be different if the percentages, were changing as they were growing overall, but they aren't really growing, which makes sense to me when you use their product, basically, which also partly explains why the BCH percentage has declined, because they've ramped up the KYC. And so I can see that the BCH community might be more willing to, okay, we'll find another solution, whereas the BTC community might just already be like, yep, okay, I'm hodling in my government approved wallet or whatever.
Yeah,
and they
that
might
was
be
pretty
more willing to
shocking
go
the
with
first
it.
time BitPay KYC'd me. I was like, oh, wait a minute, no.
Get me out of here. And
Yeah.
that's just not going to survive, like, at least in the BCH strand of things. I feel like, BitPay seemed like such a cool, company, and maybe Coinbase as well too, to a certain extent. They're just a couple of the biggest OG. People wouldn't even believe as well too that back in 2013 or 2014, Coinbase and BitPay were kind of at the same scale. They were a bit like neck and neck. And now BitPay is like some marginal side player, and Coinbase is like on the Fortune 400 or whatever. Like huge.
Well, I think,
difference between them now.
fortunately, unfortunately, it's BitPay has, I think, tried to keep with that cypherpunk, crypto ethos much more than Coinbase, right? Coinbase has been full on, the best way for crypto to reach people is to become part of the legacy system, to become a bank, literally. And whether that's true or not, I don't know, but yeah, they've taken different paths, I think, right? Because otherwise BitPay would be straight up KYCing everybody every time.
That's what it is
Coinbase, right?
already by now, basically, though, right? They've just made
I
that
don't
decision
think so.
about
They still do
4
a
or
lot
5
of
years too late.
I don't think they do a lot of not KYC stuff still.
Yeah, you can use their Amazon plugin without any KYC whatsoever. It just gives you a QR code right away.
That's cool.
So-
Well, yeah, maybe it's still kicking along there too. When my latest interactions with them, I definitely have not been at all impressed. And yeah, these sort of cash to VN stats as well too. They have some really good stats on their page too as well. bitcoincashpodcast.com/stats. You can find the links to those, and they have on there. They have the like a breakdown of by country as well. And they have how many transactions are made, as well as the volume, so if you make a bigger transaction, it counts more. And in that, BCH has already flipped BTC. So there's half as many people using Bitcoin Cash, but it actually does more total amount, only by a little bit, I think, but it does actually do more. And a big part of that seems to be because Nigeria is one of the biggest countries that is served, and I've noticed that Nigeria has a strong Bitcoin Cash community, because I guess they are a bit more focused on payments and actually getting utility out of it, and all those. Yeah, I really like
pay
digging into these stats.
fees.
Yeah, exactly. They're like, fuck that, and good for them.
So I have a comment here on this. So this is economic activity, right? But this is an old thing that bugs me. Not that bugs me, but that kind of motivates me, is that we're like this is an old phrase. Like the phrase gets totally abused, but this is still early days for crypto. And I don't mean that in the sense of, oh my God, you're going to get in on the ground floor and it's going to 1000x. That's not what I mean. What I mean is it's still very rudimentary, right? Like what we are actually accomplishing with it is very rudimentary. And so the only two commerce measures here, for example, are retail. These are both retail or remittance. Like that's it. That's the only thing on here. The economy is enormous compared to just those two things, right? Like B2B is huge. There's all kinds of things that aren't included here. and that's what I look for, and that's what I think general protocols what we're wanting to build is the tools and the infrastructure so that you can actually run a whole economy on BCH, right? Or some subset of the economy or whatever it is. Because, just sending money from A to B is one thing, but that's not all of commerce, right? There's loans, there's stock, there's shareholding, there's securities, there's all kinds of elements. Like I said, B2B that aren't really represented here, and maybe not at all in crypto in general. There's just so much more opportunity, right, for money to be applied in all kinds of commerce and to help more people. So yeah, man, just looking at this, yeah, it's good to see this because it reminds me like we have so far to go still.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, these were just the stats that I took as a bit of a sampling indicator.
Yeah,
these were some
great.
of the things I thought of. Well, maybe I should put this chart or whatever up on like I said, yeah, bitcoincashpodcast.com/stats. I've got a bit of a page there where I'm starting to collect. I have stats for the podcast. It's firstly the most important thing. I've been tracking every month, how many people are following the podcast, because I think in hindsight that'll be really interesting to see, and also because I want people in the scene can take it as an indicator of, are we actually growing or not, because that's the whole point of this show. It's only branded with Bitcoin Cash. It's very in detail Bitcoin Cash. It can't be that you just randomly stumbled across it or whatever. If you subscribe to this podcast, you want to hear about Bitcoin Cash, right? And you're also probably a real person. I'm not out there, shilling myself with random ads or like buying up those influencer scams or whatever. But
people may just want to see your handsome face, right? So
that's right. I shaved this week, so
I saw.
That's what it is. It comes around. I'm sure somebody will comment in the YouTube comments. YouTube comments, they love the beard. They know what's going on. So anyway, moving on. Next thing then. So I wanted to talk a bit about scaling and ossification, because we had obviously the fork from BCH, the upgrade fork. It all seemed to have gone really smoothly, and I guess the two of you both would have actually been quite involved in that. Certainly you were involved in the stream, which was fantastic, by the way. I really, really enjoyed that stream. And so as in kind of the aftermath of that, well, it went super smoothly, but clearly this kind of topic has been on the broader crypto community's mind, because I've seen threads and people discussing in BCH sort of we're still, because like we're saying we're at the earlier days or at the smaller community, you can be a bit more aggressive about making changes, and also about establishing a culture where people are comfortable with having upgrades and planning for the future and so on and so forth, right? So there's been discussions about, are we going to have an auto scaling block size? What about, there's been work looking into scaling for wallets and indexes and all this kind of stuff that you need to have. It's not just the actual nodes that you need to scale up. You need everything in the ecosystem to scale up, and you kind of want to do that ahead of time, right? That's just good planning. But I've interestingly also seen this kind of kicking off a bit in BTC, where they had the CTV drama that I've covered a bit, and it seems like the Blockstream team have kind of come out the winners so far on that. They've managed to just get these upstarts to back off, and they were saying, oh, we're going to release a UASF client, or we're going to force the issue a bit, but they eventually got talked down off that ledge and just kind of put their tails between the legs and kind of conceded a bit. So we'll see if there's any change in that eventually. But for the moment, there hasn't been. And I just want to read this passage that I've got here from Bitcoin Magazine. This guy Shinobi, who is a known person if you're really deep in the weeds with it, and he wrote, right now Bitcoin does not scale. If we wind up discovering that Bitcoin is ossified as it is right now, the next time we attempt a soft fork, then it does not scale to even a small fraction of the planet if everyone tries to use it in a self-custodial way. So if Bitcoin ossified today, the entire dream of a money that everyone can self-custody and be free from the risk of third parties effectively is dead for most people on this planet. Bitcoin will eventually stop changing. But if it hits that point too early, then there are huge downsides. A Bitcoin where only 5% of the world can possibly self-custody might still enact massive change to the world by being a neutral platform, opening up competition for custodial services, but it is not the true revolution of sovereignty that many Bitcoiners are here for. It's one thing if many people consciously choose not to self-custody. It is entirely another if most people are not even given that choice. And then the next section of the article is called Threading the Needle. It's not important what he wrote there, but just, this 2 paragraphs is just an insane read coming out of, one of these people who is a Bitcoin, BTC, Maxi, Bitcoin magazine land, where this is the exact mentality of Bitcoin caches. This is what they've been saying for years, and we've been, marginalized and shut off as, oh, you idiots. But, clearly the things are bubbling away a little bit there, the understanding that, no, we are not going to get to even a fraction of the planet, although it's still this kind of soft fork, things have already been mired in the mud. They just apparently can't see that yet. But in this context of this, I wanted to ask both of you, especially because you're more involved in the sort of the upgrade process and stuff. What is the BCH attitude to progress? Are we going to ossify at some point, perhaps later than Bitcoin BTC, but is there a critical point at which things will get to inbuilt? What do we need to do before then? Are we able to build in a culture of perpetually being prepared to upgrade even as things get bigger? Tell me about scaling and ossification.
I'll go first, I guess.
Please.
So it's funny, like reading that article, it could verbatim be something from 6 years ago, right? From the block size debate. That was you wouldn't be able to tell the difference between that and 6 years ago. You wouldn't have any way to tell that whether that was published by this guy or whether it was published 6 years ago, because that's the same things. And that thread the needle, I'm not sure what he says in there, but that's the same phrase that I use also since 6 years ago, which is you got to thread the needle between doing a bunch of, all kinds of stupid shit, which can break your network, which you don't do, with an actual serious money network that has, many people are using. You don't break it. And then the other side, which was you don't do anything, and then it just fails because it doesn't work. Literally, we've been saying that for 6 years. So for BCH though, the nice thing is we have the vision of actually being a competitive alternative money system for the whole world. That's a pretty clear vision that's pretty easy to get behind. And there's details to that and nuance, especially like as you hit the limits of scaling or whatever, but nobody's anywhere close to that really. So the vision is still there. It's quite clear. We know what we have to do. There's scaling, there's functionality that needs to be there for the money to be generally useful for business and commerce and economy. So that's like the things that are coming with making smart contracts better on Bitcoin Cash. There's scaling, like you said, that obviously has to be done. And BCH is like the only chain that I know of that's really taking scaling seriously, right? Not just being like, oh yeah, we'll scale the full node and like call it a day, good enough. Because all they care about is exchanges, right? If the exchange is the only person using your node, then that's all you really have to care about is what exchanges are doing. But we recognize, right? We have to actually have the whole infrastructure has to scale to, hundreds of thousands, millions, billion people, whatever. So yeah, we take that very seriously, and there's no chance that BCH is done, right? That needle still needs to be threaded. We still have to actually reach all those people and actually be useful for that many people. So there's no way it's done yet. On the other hand, with BTC, I guess I don't want to talk about it too much, but I don't want to piss people off who might be listening, right? But BTC's whole value right now is not even right now, just the whole value of it is that it doesn't change, that it's not going to change. And it's not Blockstream that's holding that. They're the face, they're the ones who hold the repo or whatever. But they're obviously, if you look at their old opinions back in the day, compared to their opinions once they started getting paid by somebody else, they completely changed their opinions. So their opinions aren't being set by themselves necessarily. And all of the institutional people who are involved, the big VCs that are involved, whoever's involved with BTC, they don't want it to change because they're not actually using it, right? It's all about marketing, and it's about number go up and the price on exchanges. That's the value of BTC. They don't really care if anybody's using it. They don't want to do anything to change the features of it or whatever, because that's a huge risk, right? The CTV drama, it could lead to a split on BTC. And so I guarantee you, there was a lot of people contacting them on the backside, through back channels, being like, hey, just chill the fuck out. Like, we don't, we're not going to do this thing. It's not worth it or whatever. And I predict the same thing is going to happen with scaling, because the value proposition of BTC is not to be used. So yeah, I think it's great with BCH. We have a clear vision about what we want to do. Bitcoin, BTC has its vision too now, whether all the cypherpunk remnants on BTC who still read the old marketing and think that that's true, I think they'll eventually realize that BTC is not what they're actually looking for. So the people who want freedom and an alternative money system, I think will move elsewhere eventually. But yeah, so BCH isn't near done. We still have a lot to do.
I was thinking about this a little bit. Sorry about that.
Go for it.
Oh, get in there.
Yeah, I was thinking about this a little bit. I don't know if it was last week or earlier this week, but about like BTC's value proposition being that it's ossified isn't even a unique value proposition. And so the most unique value proposition that BTC currently has is its ability to drive tethers to the market when the price starts to slide. Aside from that, and that's when I try to boil it down, that's the only conclusion that I can come to. So if anyone wants to correct that conclusion, please feel free. But otherwise, I'm going to run with that.
Yeah. Well, just more generally speaking, it's marketing. Like I was saying, it's marketing. It's
a combination of brand
marketing.
and the ossification is somewhat unique, and this is where it is a very fine distinction here that Bitcoin they can say, like, look, we've been around for the longest, 12 years. Okay, that's also true for BCH and the other forks, but relative to Ethereum, they can still be like, aha, young whippersnapper. But it's also true that Ethereum is busy, changing things every week. So it is, the amount of time where it has pretty much not changed is also massive compared to the vast majority of cryptos that either have only been around a couple of years or have changed stuff or are still going to keep changing stuff like Ethereum, like core fundamental things. And they also have the hash rate, right? That's a very big deal as well. If BCH had all the SHA-256 hash rate, I would agree with you. BTC is basically finished. But a combo of that, we haven't changed very much, combined with we've got the titanic amount of mining infrastructure. Those two things are sort of semi-synergistic, provided the price holds up, and that's where the tethers come into it. If it doesn't, then you're finished. But as long as the price holds up at least enough that they can get those fat coin rewards in there and sustain a pretty massive mining infrastructure, then it's easy for people, especially in big finance and whatever, to be like, yeah, I can just park a couple million in here, a couple billion in here, and in 10 years it'll still be around. That might not be true because, BCH might come out of nowhere and suck out all their hashing power and therefore screw their chains as fees go to the moon. But at least for the time being, while BCH isn't a threat, that is the value proposition, and that is unique because nobody else has that mining infrastructure either. Cheap Lightning.
I love how the tether is like, so the situation with tether just being printed more or less to bail out, right? The BTC, it's so close to the original, like, the bailout, chancellor on the brink of bailout in the Bitcoin
So ironic.
block, right? It's so close.
Ironic.
It's funny.
Yeah, I'm not a developer, so I can't really comment too much on what's going on as far as development on BCH. Other than my very surface level understanding, but I do spend a lot of time in the community, in the weeds, and listening to people discussing things. And there's certainly a percentage of people who are like, why aren't we changing faster, right? I hear these kinds of things often. Why don't we change faster? Why don't we do this? Why don't we do that? Right? There's a lot of talk of we need to change this and that and this and that. Right or wrong, it doesn't matter. There's lots of talk of change. I've never heard a single person say we need to lock it down. I've never heard a single person say we have to stop changing stuff, right? It's just not a thing. It's not a thing that exists on BCH. There are no people who are like, okay, we're done. There's absolutely nobody, at least publicly, that I've heard say anything like that. I find it, very ironic what BTC has become. And even as far as marketing goes, like if you watch television, like American comedy or whatever, Saturday Night Live or whatever, they don't talk about Bitcoin anymore. None of these shows talk about Bitcoin. They talk about crypto. The last two American television things I saw that mentioned anything going on in the space were talking about crypto. They showed the Bitcoin like coin, but they didn't say the name, right? They just made jokes about crypto and how you lost all your money and et cetera. But from a culture point of view, Bitcoin has become boomer coin. There's nothing to talk about, right? There's nothing happening. It's just dead. It's really dead. And the CTV drama was really fascinating to see. I'm sure most people in the audience are not aware, but a lot of the discussion that was going on about CTV was happening in a secret Telegram chat that you had to pay Lightning to join the conversation. Anybody could click on the link and read the posts that were happening. And what was fascinating to me was that the conversation was not about really getting consensus. It was about getting the blessing of Adam back, right?
But it couldn't be said. Like
it couldn't be
everybody
said.
danced around it.
Right.
Yeah.
And it was really fascinating to watch. And I think there probably are a lot of people on the BTC side of things who are OGs who drank the Kool-Aid back in the day and believe that Roger and Jihan are just out to destroy Bitcoin and the evil Chinese miners are going to take over and all of those things that we read at the time, right? That was a huge thing. I remember Luke, when I was, just studying the fork, like Luke and a bunch of other people were talking about evil Chinese miners. And at the time I thought like, oh yeah, I don't want all mining to be centralized in one country, especially not under a communist government. But once once the fork finished, they didn't care at all anymore about where the miners were located. That's a whole other thing. But yeah, I think there's a lot of people who are BTC OGs who actually believe that it will still be money for the world on some level as soon as the developers fix Lightning or whatever magic bullet wonder weapon they think is in the pipe. But they're not even willing to explore the changes necessary to have these wonder weapons become active, right? Like Lightning is going to take whatever 130 megabyte blocks or whatever. Like they're not willing to do those things. So it's not going to be usable. It's just not going to be usable for people.
Yeah, no. That's what I was saying. The people that are serious about actually using it, they're going to have no choice but to move on. And that may be Bitcoin Cash. That may be something else, whatever it is. Who knows? Sorry, Jeremy, I know you were going to say something after that. I want to say something about the BCH governance stuff.
All right, now it's kind of slipped out of my head. What was I going to say?
Sorry.
No.
Sorry.
I was going to say, okay. So what I was going to say about ossification was, I think the reason, whoever swallowed propaganda, they did that, right? But what people don't understand about decentralization, even though everybody loves decentralized, we've got to have more decentralization and all that sort of stuff. What they don't understand is that decentralization is very hard to direct, and it sets in kind of quietly, right? Decentralized stuff wins. It's like the moss creeping over the boulder or something like that. And so I think there's still a sense that I get from a lot of people who are in BDC who never were convinced by BCH or whatever, that what they haven't understood is the frog is cooked. Like, it's too late now. They still feel like, oh yeah, no, but everybody's still got genuine intentions, and when the irons to the fire, like, everybody will rally together and come up with whatever, but that's done. Like, it is essentially ossified, if not in reality or in the code. It's ossified in terms of the people that are in charge and have got the hands on the lever of power, and the culture of millions of people. You literally can, whoever is bought into Bitcoin BTC has done so. It's a self-fulfilling cycle of the people who want what that is promising, and they're going to be the ones who are going to be upset if it's changed. And so then it trends more in that direction. It drags in more people who buy into that same story about we're not going anywhere. It's going to be literally impossible to ever dig their way out of that. And by contrast, BCH is definitely a smaller community, but it's a much healthier one, and new people that arrive will buy into a healthier narrative, and that just compounds on itself, like I said, over the next several years, once the BCH community starts swelling. But that message in a decentralized way is spreading out to them, the culture of how things are done here and what the game plan is. That's not something you can revert, and it's also going to make it very, very difficult, or hopefully impossible, for the same thing to happen again, because we just preserve that story and keep telling people, look, this is what happened in the fork. Here's what happens if you go wrong. Peer-to-peer cash. Can I freaking send you some money and you give me an apple? If you're not doing that on-chain, non-custodial, it's not Bitcoin Cash. Got it? And that just spreads to every different person. So everybody should remember that. John.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Just on that point that you were saying, a good response, not in an argumentative way, but in a kind of elucidation way to help people see things clearly. If someone in BTC ecosystem ever says to me, oh, well, all we have to do is increase the block size and it blows BCH out of the water or something like that. And I'm like, well, no, that doesn't even work. But even if you think that's true, what's the risk of a split, right? Just ask them, what's the risk of a split? And they're like, yeah. Right? They just, yeah. Because like you said, there's so much momentum on no change that any change starts to bring up a huge risk of a split. And that is going to be shut down hard. What's that?
Well, even Taproot, there was some controversy and some very, I guess, non-existent power play, but Taproot was a little bit contentious as well.
Yeah, a little bit, but it obviously had the blessing in the end.
Right.
No, it was about the activation method. Well, that's where it's just again, it's just the boiling frog. It was over the activation method, and now this time it's over the activation method as well as the actual thing. So it's like, the first one was you can't increase the blocks because you don't have consensus, and then it was, well, you can't fork because you don't have consensus unless you have the UASF shenanigans going, and then it was, well, you need to have that, and you got to have this Taproot speedy trial activation, and now it's moved on to, well, you got to have speedy trial, and it can only be a soft fork, and you can't be accused of being a Bcasher, and also you have to technical play consensus. That's right, you need technical consensus. You got to have the economic knowns. It's got to be so vaguely defined that nobody fucking knows, and it's just the wheel is just it's like a car that's starting to rust because it's not driving anywhere. Just everything is just rusting. It's just sinking into the mud. It's never going to drive anywhere. So I don't know.
All right, so let me move on to BCH.
Yeah.
Cheap Lightning brought up a good point, which is lots of people have ideas, right? That something should change, this should change, or the block size should be faster. I mean, the block time should be shorter,
Interval,
or
yeah.
or whatever. All kinds of ideas, right? And that's something that BCH has somewhat uniquely solved in crypto. Of course, nobody knows if it's going to be a solution that lasts forever, but it works well for now, and it's pretty unique. And that's like the chip process, where there's a shelling point that everybody agrees how to do upgrades, and they agree because they agree. That's the nature of shelling points, right? As long as everybody follows it, then everybody's following it. But the answer to why don't things change faster is that you don't change a money network quickly. It's not a fail fast scenario, right? It's not like Silicon Valley where you can change your app, break your database, piss off 50% of the users, and then be like, well, it doesn't matter because we're still growing and we'll just fix it, and we'll fix all the old things that had bugs or errors or whatever. With money, you can't do that, right? You can't cause somebody to lose their life savings and then be like, shit happens. So right, that's one thing. It's not a fail fast system. That's not how it works. If you're serious about people performing commerce and economy on your chain. So yeah, things happen very carefully and deliberately over time, and they're predictable, and you know what's going to happen ahead of time, far ahead of time. You know what's coming down the road, and you know what you're going to have to do to deal with things. And the other is that I forget what I was going to say.
Oh no!
but anyway,
again.
not again. But yeah. So the whole governance process is a big deal, and it's something that BCH has uniquely been sorting out and figuring out and stumbling our way through a little bit. But we're trying to thread that needle. Like, we've been trying to do that for a long time, and I think we're further ahead on that than I think any other chain is, on actually figuring out a way to make the changes that are needed without breaking things. Oh, right. And the other thing that the chip process does is it removes the Adam Backs and the Omri Sachets and the people who want to be gatekeepers on what changes. Actually, I think some of them didn't necessarily, on some chains like Vitalik and stuff, they don't want necessarily to be gatekeepers, but they are, whether they want to or not. And chip process has established a way to do that, where you don't need to have a particular person who gives the blessing to what changes are going to happen. And that's pretty unique. So yeah, I think we have a good thing going on governance and finding a way forward that does that threading of the needle.
To learn more about the chip process, please visit the Satoshi's Angels YouTube channel, where we recently made a video.
Or look up my FAQ, which is how does Bitcoin Cash governance, and that video is linked in that that explanation with the stuff Bitcoin Cash podcast.
Yeah, Jeremy, your FAQ thing is really good. It's underutilized. When I've looked at it, you have really good explanations for things. I think people should use that more. It's a great resource.
I'm slowly building it up. I mean, the idea is that people are not going to go back and watch, if you watch every episode of the podcast, you can get all those same explanations sprinkled in here and there.
Right.
But, people especially, yeah, exactly. But sometimes people just got to, that's the kind of thing and they all sort of interlink to each other is good as well too, because people can read one thing and then, oh, wait, this connects to that. You kind of need to understand the mentality as a whole complete ecosystem. And just on that point of the chip process and stuff, I think, a key part as well too that is hard won, that other chains, even if in their mind they can just sort this stuff out themselves, it's not really that simple, is you've got to be able to back it up with the fact that we do have a bunch of node teams that are, as far as I could tell, independent, and so maybe BCHN is sort of the main guys at the moment a little bit, but firstly they just seem to be a little bit of a collective. It wasn't like a designed thing, like they were all under one umbrella, more just like, well, this is how it worked out. So I could, it seems feasible, at least from my understanding, that there would be a future where there was a disagreement and they kind of split off and they made two separate sub teams or join the other node implementations according to who they preferred or whatever. I could see that scenario happening, but also, and there are credible alternatives that could take over. But there's also just the history that it is baked into the community's story that it tells itself, and the history of people who've been around, and what is taught to newcomers to the community that, look, there's been 3 forks. Like, if the community wants you out, you got to go. Like, that's it, And it might be easy for another chain to think, yeah, the community is going to just rise up and overrule the devs or the foundation or whatever manifestation this kind of central, power is in charge of. But that means at the end, at a certain point, you're essentially going signing up for a civil war, the crypto civil war. And if you don't have a community that says, look, we're gonna pull out all the stops when that happens, and doesn't have a track record of, it worked out and we came through the other side better, even though it was very painful. If you're one of these other currencies, to earn that status, you're gonna have to go through, like BCH has been through, tons of turmoil, loads of people dropping out of the scene, momentum slowing down, your price cratering, all these costs you're gonna have to pay to earn that community resiliency and mentality. And almost no coin can afford that. They will just die trying to get through that gauntlet one time, let alone 3 times. And
what we learned with the chip process, of the reason, a big part of developing it, was that splits are not there's a huge cost to those things, like you said, right? You just die. In most cases, you just die. The network dies effectively. So yeah, there's a huge cost to it that people minimize sometimes. And that's big part of chip is not, of course, splits can happen, right? Like, anyone today can get an ASIC and go split the chain if they want to, right? It's just a question of what actually happens with that split. And that's a big part of the chip process, because a lot of the changes that people propose, they don't realize it, but they're really bad ideas. And of course, among those, there's going to be some good ideas. But that's the whole point of the chip process, is that the default, this is a great idea, it doesn't matter. No, the network is not interested until you've actually put in the long hours and the communication and the coordination to actually figure out if it really is a good idea or not. And by the time you've done that, and by the time you've convinced everybody that it is a good idea, well, it's already baked in and there's no need for a split, right? So it's getting ahead of the whole split, because splits start socially, not technically. They're not technical problems. They're social problems. So it gets ahead of that, and it either shunts you off to the side because you had a bad idea, or you aren't actually willing to be a stakeholder and put skin in the game and make it happen, or it's actually a good idea and everybody starts to buy into it, and then it just happens. So yeah, it gets ahead of that social split.
Yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, I think, I guess, I like that there's those 2 elements to it. So on the first hand is, we've now got a process where there shouldn't, or we should minimize the risk of splits. And I think that that's unlikely. And I said on one of the earliest episodes of this podcast, I've reiterated since, I haven't seen any sign that there would be another split. And I don't see one going forward, especially as momentum starts building, and it already has been. Everybody's happy, basically. Like, things are working, things are rolling in the right direction. So there's the cracks start up, the angst starts up when things are going badly according to the community's own metrics, which, again, because the BCH community is less focused on the price or less focused on what's flavor of the month this week, they're less worried about that. But the important things started moving in the right direction, and people can understand that. So on average, they're happy. I think that's really important. But on the other hand, I also like the fact that if push came to shove, BCH could live through another fork. I believe it, and that's really important, because you want to have those 2 things. You want to have a chip process, so you never need to have a fork, and you also want to know that if it worst comes to worst, you've still got the fork, and you can still just kick out whoever's causing grief if they find their way in there. So all this is to say, we got to move on to the next slide. I don't know how much time, like, I don't know if you guys want to do another hour or not, but we've still got a few slides, but I don't know how you feeling for time.
All the
how
time in
fast
the
we're gonna get through
world.
this? Okay, all right.
I've got more coffee than you. So I'm
Okay, perfect. All right. Well, I just wanted to touch on quickly then Bitcoin SV, who haven't been mentioned on this show very much at all throughout the whole
Sorry,
runs. Yeah, Bitcoin SV.
Right. Yeah, right.
They haven't been really mentioned very much, but I keep a bit of an eye on them because there's a few coins I like to follow, and they're one of them, because I think as time goes on, like we were just talking about the BTC and the BCH thing, time is the ultimate sort of divisor or separator of things, especially when in the case of a split they literally started as the same thing, and you just see things play out differently. And I think the BCH community can take a lot of lessons of where are we doing things right and where are we doing things wrong. Like mostly I think it's right, but it's still also handy to see, okay, from another perspective, what is their community concerned with, or what are they learning, or what are they focusing on or doing, where are they doing well. And I've just noticed recently that we just had this comments from Twitch, who are some sort of social media BSV app. I don't really know much about it, but they were commenting on Twitter, here's what needs to happen for BCH to win at Roger Ver. Unfuck op return limit, re-enable Bitcoin script, increase block size, lower fees, 10x or so, sincerely the CTO. And they had this kind of follow-up tweets where they were saying, if you guys put this changes in, we've got all our devs ready and we'll come and join BCH. Thanks. And everything like that.
Awesome.
And
it's going to be totally different than it was on BSV. Like
that's what I didn't understand, right? Because it's weird. They're like, guys, we'll come back to BCH if you turn BCH into BSV. You put in all these things that we say is needed, and it's like you've already got that on BSV. It should be so. You've got what you want. Isn't it going great? Why? What?
Right?
Well, okay. Why? I have two comments, and then I'd prefer not to talk about BSV.
Yeah. Okay. But just short.
One is that, like I just said, we have the chip process. If you think these are amazing and really good changes for BCH, go for it, right? Like convince the ecosystem. It's not going to happen because you fucking pinged Roger Ver to make the change. What a fucking idiot. So yeah, if you want changes to happen, then make them happen and convince the ecosystem that they're a very good idea. The default answer for everyone, regardless of the size of your bank account or your voice, is no, until you've actually convinced businesses, stakeholders, users, investors, the technical teams, so forth. Until you've convinced everybody that it's a good idea, it's not a good idea. So that's one thing. Yeah, and then the other is just that BSV is obviously having some kind of meltdown, right? They're disintegrating with splits and something going on over there. So right, somebody who's desperate to find a new home to live in, yeah, sure, come use BCH, but don't expect to be given a platform for no good reason.
It doesn't make any sense to me. If you're not happy with SV and you want to move to BCH, well, then you have to adapt, right? If you want to be a guest in someone's house, you don't go in and say, hey, open up all the windows, I know it's winter, and also we're having ice cream for dinner, and like, just whether or not that's awesome, it doesn't matter. You just don't do it. Yeah, I don't want to spend any more time on this either, but pinging Roger for some reason, he's not a developer. Like, I don't like. I guess if you can convince Roger that getting Twitch would be the best thing in the world, then he could try and put it, but at the end of the day, it's just going to be a whole lot of fluff unless someone sits down and starts a chip. So get chipping, boys.
Chip away at it. That needs to be the slogan.
Chip away.
To answer why Roger Ver? Probably because they're accustomed to Calvin and Craig, right? Like you convince Calvin and or Craig that something is a good idea, and it happens because they own BSP. So
Right.
Yeah. All right. Well, we don't have to spend any more
good
time on this, but yeah, I just think it's really, you know, important. It's just, to me, it's like action speaks louder than words. And once you get this sense, and I think we will see this at some point, we're going to see it too with the BTC people. There's going to be a point at which it's going to be like, but couldn't you guys be a bit more like us? But we kind of want to join up with you. Like it speaks, you know, it speaks volumes, right? Once somebody's saying like, I'm gonna kind of come back if you'll meet me halfway. It's like you're already meeting us all the way because you're out. See, if you want to come back, it's on you. You know, we don't care.
No,
so,
I guess I should say one thing. I have heard a bunch of people like, oh, we should welcome people back, right? And I'm like, okay, there's a big difference, like Cheap Lightning said, between saying you want to use BCH, use it. Like there's lots of people using BCH who don't make noise about it and don't have silly opinions or, you know, that they spout all over the place about things. There's lots of users of BCH who don't make a lot of noise. So there's a huge difference between saying, okay, sure, use BCH. Of course, you're welcome. It's a permissionless network. And saying, you know, oh, come up on the stage and let's everybody listen to this guy who was doing some insane shit somewhere else that doesn't make any sense, and let's welcome them. Like, no, there's a big difference there. To use the chain, absolutely, everybody's welcome to use it. To like give people a platform and amplify their voice, no. Please.
Yeah, you got to earn that. Yeah, very, very important. And I think we need to sort of set the ground rails in now as well too, because I expect that especially if there gets a certain point of hype, if BCH, you know, rises up a few places on CoinMarketCap and a bunch of other people, you know, start kind of coming in, well, that's going to come in two flavors, right? One is just going to be crypto noobs or, you know, people who've never had any crypto who are just going to be like, that's going to be their first thing. Oh, how does this all work? And so they're going to sort of adjust to the vibe, right? But as you rise up the ranks, especially these days, you're likely to get more converts who are already dug in a bit on another chain who for one reason or another think, oh, maybe I could jump ship. And then they're going to try and join your community, but also bring their old, you know, mentality or their old way of doing or their old understanding of things in with them. And so we do want them as part of our ecosystem.
You get that new blood. Yeah. You do get the new blood, the new ideas, but most ecosystems haven't faced enemy action, so to speak, like BCH has, right? Like actual fighting, like hash wars and so forth, where there's a huge amount of economic damage that happens. And so the voices I hear saying, oh, we should invite these guys in. Why don't we put them on the stream and have a talk? And I'm like, yeah, because you haven't been punched in the face yet. Like you haven't been burned hard by bad ideas before. Like you really got to be careful with who you put on the stage and who you talk to, right? Craig was such a perfect example of that. He came in, and because he had money and the backing of some clueless billionaire, then suddenly he had a voice and he had like a first place at the table, right? And then it's like, wait a minute, he's literally saying that he's Satoshi. He's totally full of shit. Why does he have a place at the table, right? So yeah, get chipping if you want things to happen, then convince the ecosystem, but just having a voice or money isn't good enough.
Yeah, important that we've got that kind of built in. All right, next thing in more sort of positive news and sort of somewhat related to this actually was the Bitcoin Cash research site. I was having a bit of a look on there. Another great resource that everybody should go and check out. I'm sure they're always open to more contributors, and especially devs might be interested, you know, some more technical chat and stuff going on there. But I think it was Rucknium did this analysis of the coins, and this is kind of coming back to our points about blockchain analysis and stuff. This is actually one of the very few cases where this is very highly pertinent and accurate in a sense, because it's looking at a crypto specific thing through a crypto lens of did an analysis of looking back to at the point that Bitcoin split into BTC and BCH, what were all the coins then? And then obviously they all got duplicated, right, onto BTC and BCH. And it's now been nearly 5 years. And so you can see of those coins, which ones have moved, right? Which ones were moved, and were they moved on both sides or one side or neither? And which did they move first or whatever, right? And basically found, so I've got a chart here and people can look at this, thread link if they want to read. There was more charts and breakdowns and all this kind of stuff was going on, right? So if you're interested, you can dig into it a lot. But the headliner is that of all the Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash that there was at the time of the split, 26.4% of it hasn't moved, hasn't been spent on either chain, right? And so presumably about the vast majority of that is probably just gone forever, right? Hodling like that for 5 years through multiple splits that you could have cashed in on at the very least if you didn't believe in them or whatever is a big move. I'm sure there's some, it's definitely not going to be zero, but there's got to be some amount, there's probably a pretty minimal amount. So that's about 4,300,056 thousand sort of Bitcoins, right? So that's about 26.4% of the Bitcoins at the time of the split. Then there's about another 1.3 million or 8.1%, which has been spent on BTC, but not on BCH. So some percentage of that is probably BTC people who move their coins and whatever, but will never get their BCH because they didn't realize they could cash it in, or they've, lost that wallet or whatever several years ago, or maybe they just don't care because the value is relatively less. And if the price ratio is reversed, suddenly they would be digging back through their old wallets to find that BCH is also a possibility. There's 1.6% that has been spent on BCH, but not spent on BTC. And that would, I would guess, probably, largely be Bitcoin maxis that are sort of cashing out, that were like, all right, I'm done with this, just let me add to my cold storage that I'm not moving anywhere maybe. And then 63.8% or a bit over 10.5 million BCH has been, 10.5 million Bitcoin has been spent on both chains. So this kind of, has a few different things to point out. I do feel like, okay, about 4.3 million Bitcoin lost forever sounds about right to me. 1 million Satoshis, maybe, 2 or 3 million from the rest of the ecosystem, particularly in the early days before it was super valuable. About 10.5 million Bitcoin, BCH currently circulating, plus the ones since the fork, obviously. So that will add a bunch. So what's this? 14, 15, 16. So let's add another 3 million. So maybe 13 or 14 million BCH currently actively in circulation. Sounds about right to me. And basically it just kind of makes the point that probably at this point, if anybody was in BTC who wanted to sell their BCH, they pretty much have. And so that's, I think, also why the community is starting to, congeal a bit more on the main vision and stuff. And going forward, if it starts to get momentum, there won't suddenly be people coming out of left field, to crash the party because they've sold out and they don't care anymore. Or at least, they can't dump on the price pretty much. So I don't know, any thoughts on any of this kind of analysis?
Yeah, I just think it's interesting to be able to say, there's right, the spent and spent can't happen accidentally, right?
Yes.
That's one thing that can't happen accidentally. So vast majority of what's going to be moved from the split has been moved. That's a big point. I didn't realize that was the case. And the rest of it, who knows how it'll be done? But like you said, it's a very small percent now, so it's kind of out of the picture as far as having an unknown in the background, right? It's not really an unknown anymore. It's just what the ecosystems do from here on.
That's right. Yeah, I just thought it was a fascinating example of how
it is.
Yeah, like the ecosystems diverge over time. And in this case, they literally have diverged in terms of the blockchain, but it just comes back to all those same things. Like time just takes its, time takes its toll on each community in a different way. And for BCH specifically, being the minority side of a fork is so painful because you have everybody on the majority side dumping you out of existence basically, and you have to weather that storm, and maybe that's something that BCH has actually successfully done. All right,
I'm
next.
really curious.
Go on.
Just one last thing. I'm really curious what the first category there of unspent coins. I'm really curious what percentage of those coins moved pre-fork, but post Satoshi disappearing, like in that range, right? There's certainly a percentage of people who around the fork time were just like, okay, my coins are in cold storage. I'm just not going to touch anything, and then 30 years down the road, we'll see who came out on top, and I'll cash out then. If you want to cash out and not use it as cash, but yeah, I'm really curious what percentage of coins didn't move even before the fork as well. So
like the 2012 to 2016, like what coins were spent in there, but then not spent after the fork.
Right. You hear stories about people who threw away their laptop that had 10,000 Bitcoins on it or whatever, right? So there's probably a bunch of those people. I'm really curious what percentage of coins we can relatively safely say are never going to move again, right?
Yeah. Well, maybe, I don't know, dig into the thread. I don't think that was one of the things, but there was some more analysis, and it was done by how many outputs were spent, as well as this is by how much value was spent, but some of it was by how many outputs were moved and stuff like that. So there was a bunch more, but yeah, we can do a whole breakdown of it on this show. All right, next one, community comment of the week. So this is the longest community comment of the week. It's a pretty intense one, but I had to read it out because this is just a killer comment, and there's going to be some thoughts about this one way or another, I'm sure. So this one comes from on Reddit, RBDC, font of all great Bitcoin discussion. And as I'm just trying to get my there we go. It comes from U _ 2Q_X, who responded to a thread by Mountainous Fog, who was asking, is faith in the coin the number one thing which keeps 99.999% of coins alive and which prevents them from crashing to zero? So basically the topic is, like, could it just be exploitable to short a coin and then put out a ton of FUD, and then the coin crashed to zero? Basically what happened to Luna, almost in a way. Like, couldn't that just wreck any coin in crypto, was basically the question. And like, couldn't BCH be in that camp as well too, I guess, before investing in it? And so 2Q_X replied, oh man, this is actually quite long, but it's good, I promise. All right, so the reply is, no, it's math. So this is, no, it's math backing the coin, not faith. Compounding rates specifically. Bitcoin-like currencies have about a 1.5% annual issuance rate. The Fed was increasing the M3 supply 24% annually for the last 2 years. Inflation will catch up with the dollar in a few years, and the price of coins will catch up when shorts have to cover or roll over their positions, which could be soon. Since 2017, the US dollar has been diluted 58% in total. And with manipulation, if someone made 330 million shorting 100,000 BCH in 2017, it would only take 18 million to lock up all the coins they sold and prevent them from doing it again. We basically gained 30x leverage in hard currency without leverage. And that 18 million is getting cheaper by the day, like having 11 million in 2017. For most of the decent currencies, the manipulators are trying to keep the price below the 2017 all-time high for two reasons. They want to invoke a death spiral narrative, and two, they don't want to recapitalize their initial short position. They can borrow as many coins as they can to short, but eventually that are going to be borrowing coins just to pay back borrowed coins. We're moving real money from people who think they have it in a, quote, custodial app into our own wallets for pennies on the dollar. And we're screaming at the people getting scammed to stop thinking for a moment that those ever were, in quotes, their coins. Decentralized currencies don't die like companies. The Dogecoin squeeze last year is proof of that, if you know what you saw. What hedge funds were doing to companies was appalling, but decentralized projects aren't like companies. They are designed to never stop. The main goal is resiliency against attacks and uptime. If someone is stupid enough to short a decentralized fixed issuance currency to make a triangle in a hyperinflationary fiat chart, they're too stupid to have access to sound money. The exchanges that loaned ultra hard currencies didn't know enough math to honor their fiduciary responsibilities. The collective sum of coins that everyone holds in apps like Robinhood, Square, PayPal, Venmo, Coinbase, Kraken, Gemini, and Cash App is exactly zero. We told everyone that again and again. If the exchange's bankruptcy claims are denominated in the coins they lost, the amount owed in fiat will never go down. The Mt. Gox hack was $450 million at the time. It's $25 billion today. No exchange that loans coins is going to survive in the long run, and none of them will make customers whole. So that was a lot, and it's a lot to take in. I had to read this comment like several times, but basically the gist of it is that not your keys, not your coins is kind of working its way into the financial system with these huge companies like Coinbase and Gemini and whatever that are taking people's coins in on exchanges, and they're loaning them out to other people to get an interest rate, right? But at the end of the day, the blockchain makes sure that there's only 21 million BCH, even if the exchanges get a bit loosey-goosey with the numbers. And especially as time goes on and the price of crypto rises over time, like happened with Mt. Gox, if they lost 118,000 Bitcoin and then the regulators come and say, look, you've got to pay these people back, well, they've still got to pay 118,000 Bitcoin, even if the fiat price of that has, 10x or whatever in the meantime. So they're guaranteed to be underwater in terms of, the creditors are basically going to take a haircut, right? They have to have lost their money. And so the general premise is that everyone in crypto who's not thinking, not your keys, not your coins, at any one time, the chances that they are ever going to get their money back from the exchanges is constantly going down, because the exchanges are always trying to make money by doing these shorting and loaning schemes. And the more of it they do, the more sort of fake crypto ends up floating around but the blockchain will not let that stand, which is the whole point of the system. And so we're going to see a lot of issues in the future with people who didn't understand any of this getting wrecked as they lose their coins. But at the end of the day, there's no bailouts, right? There's no Federal Reserve that can come in if there was a bank run on Coinbase or Binance or whatever. At the end of the day, a lot of people would end up without there would be nothing they could do if it ended up with everyone withdrawing. So yeah, I don't know, that was a very long comment, and I recommend people to, I don't know, maybe re-listen to that readout or check the thread or whatever, because it's a very big comment if you really think through what it's all about.
The flip side of that is as the Tether bailout, which we talked about before, right? So there's an opposite direction of this, which is if I put my tinfoil hat on a little bit, right? I kind of see Tether as controlled opposition now. The fact that those guys are not in jail strongly suggests that they've cut a deal of some sort, right? To me, it suggests that. So from that perspective, right, I see Tether as more like it's the sword of Damocles that the Fed or whoever is holding over crypto, right? Hey, if we ever need it to crash, we have the tool to make it crash and kind of short circuit this type of concern by just making people panic and try to get out.
So Luna was a shot across the bow then?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Luna just failed by itself. I think. Yeah. I mean, the guys who are running it seem to have gotten out like bandits, right? They took a huge payout from that whole setup, and their creditors, potentially some of them, but all the little people involved in it, I think, got screwed. But I think that was just its own thing. But yeah, Tether is massively larger than that, and yeah, I don't know. It seems like a pretty useful tool. If I were wanting to put a CBDC out in the world, I would surely want people to lose confidence in crypto. And Tether would be a great way to accomplish that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Luna blow up might have at least woken up a few more, people to the problems here, and that's definitely why it's critical that again, it all just comes back to community education, and also the more peer-to-peer commerce you have going on, the less people are going to be affected by some, Tether blow up, and the more speculator focused you are, the more everyone's going to get rugged and lose all their money. Yeah.
It all comes down to that. If people are actually using it, then they'll be like, oh, that sucks over there. I'm glad I'm not over there. Right? But if we don't have an actual functional economy running on crypto, Bitcoin Cash or whatever, then that doesn't work like that, right? You're actually living in the legacy finance system, and you do get screwed by it. You will lose confidence. Yeah.
I think I would be a little disappointed if Tether implodes and the price of BCH, because of all this community resilience, doesn't go down, because I'm like eagerly waiting for that day.
No, it's going to go down. Just hopefully it's not going to be, well, that's why the Luna case is the classic, right? Because Luna just completely blew up and every other crypto took a dip of like 10 to 20% or whatever, right? And I mean, honestly, that's not too bad. Like, that's, especially since it was across the board and not like, Tether might be a bit more lopsided in terms of which coins were more sharply affected than others, right? Which ones were more pegged into all that ecosystem. But, it's still like, well, that Luna went to zero. Yeah. And so whoever was in that, you are finished. Your portfolio, that's it. End of story. But everyone in all the other cryptos, it's like, okay, overall, everyone was a bit shaky. But at the end of the day, people were like, well, that was them. Like, that wasn't me. So,
I'm just thinking back to the episode that we did with Bennett, where he was laughing at Uname, I think, for being like, oh, we'll still go down. We'll just go down less.
Where the perpetual like number go up, we've got number go down. Yeah, perfect. Right. That'll get him in the door.
Exactly. Oh, anti-hype. I forgot about that, man. Let's get that back.
Anti-hype, yeah.
Got some anti-hype. Perfect.
Bennett thought we were pretty entertaining with the anti-hype.
Right.
That's good. That's good. I'm glad he was able to have a laugh with us, crypto folk, as well, once in a while. All right, next one, we got meme of the week. So this one is from @Janinho Sao on Twitter, who posted a link, just straight up a link to a Reuters article, which said, to invest in crypto assets in the countries surveyed, the ECB said, with regard to financial literacy, respondents who scored either at the top level or the bottom level in terms of financial literacy scores were highly likely to hold crypto assets. And then they combined that with the meme template of the midwit meme, which is on the left, you have like the caveman idiot person at 0.1% IQ of the bell curve. And then you have the bell curve, and at the top you have the like salty midwit who's just crying and always has some complicated rationalization that still is like, you're a bit of an idiot. And then at the top side, you have the, I don't know, super cool hacker, smart guy or whatever, who's in the 145 IQ. And the joke always is that the stupidest people in the room and the smartest people in the room are thinking the same thing. And the like idiots in the middle have their like very complicated, but nevertheless like self-assuring but wrong like reasoning. And that's what it's not like the ECB said, well, we did a survey and we found that all the people who had no financial literacy love crypto, which you think they'd love to say, but instead it was like, well, it was the very dumbest people and the very smartest. So if it was actually a few of the geniuses are getting involved too. So this is clearly not just nothing, but on the other hand, so congratulations to everyone listening to this show. You're either in the bottom 1% or the top 1% of the IQ bell curve. So it's an exercise for the reader to determine which part of the bell curve you're in. But I can confirm that you're not in the middle portion of midwits.
Congratulations to the low end. people, you're going to get dragged to the top. That's wonderful. Awesome.
Well, that's why this meme is so good. It's one of my favorite
Right?
meme formats. I always really enjoy it because it kind of just, it's like a truth of the universe, right? Like sometimes the stupidest thing is the smartest thing. Like it's the most effective in computer programming. You see this all the time, right? Like when you're a developer, right? When you start computer programming, you often have very simple solutions to problems. Like we need to, do this calculation. Why don't we just run it 100,000 times and, we'll just get the answer eventually, right? We'll just guess and check or brute force, right? And then you have devs and they learn, okay, I can refactor code or I can do this or whatever. And they make some complicated systems. They actually make it worse. And then after you've got enough experience, you come back, full circle and you start realizing like, this is a problem. Like, let's just brute force it. Let's just let the computer do it. And so it was like the, noob devs, even if their skill in implementing it was low, they at least had the right idea, and I just think a lot of things in life are like that. It's like peer-to-peer cash,
taking this too seriously, because I don't know how seriously to take this, but if I took this too seriously, I would want to know which of those two had the Luna. was it the smart ones, or was it the dumb ones? Because I'm not sure which one it would be.
I think it's the midwits who had the Luna. Right? The
so
smart
they
ones
involved in crypto, right? The midwits didn't have crypto.
Oh right, yeah, true.
So it's got to be with the guy on the left or the guy on the right that had the Luna. Which one was it?
Well, I think
don't know.
A little bit of both.
I think we got to zoom in here and be like, okay, even on let's take out the midwits and we just remake this graph of the low IQ on one side and the high IQ on the other. You're gonna have midwits.
Put the coins on one side.
Yeah. So I think you'd find the midwits in both of those camps probably ended up with Luna, but I would assume that the midwits in the high IQ camp dumped on the midwits in the low IQ camp.
Yeah.
Just to be fair, they said it's not IQ here, it's right. It's financial literacy. I'm not sure they
exactly maps to IQ, right?
Yeah. I've got a better resolution here at the very bottom of the meme graph. It says IQ score. It goes from 55 to 145.
Yeah, but he's saying in the ECB's analysis was of the financial literacy, right?
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So the original format is about the IQ, but
all right, I'm in the bottom score there. I'm in that low.
But I think, I think that would be such a funny meme if somebody did this meme, but then they took the icons of the top, 25 cryptos and they distributed them with like some next to the idiot, some next to the smart guy, and some in the middle. Like maybe we can make that up and use it to just roast people. Cash with just the BCH logo, and then cash with the BCH logo, and then BTC, and then store of value. And Michael Saylor told me that blah blah blah. Like some complicated, like the dev said that we didn't have technical consensus, and like blah blah blah. I don't know. I just love this meme format. I just think it's one of the most true. Humor just cuts right to the point, really. Okay, second last slide. I always call it last. That's not the last slide. Message to the community. So as per usual, Cheap Lightning, you've already had one of these, so I think it's got to be Emergent Reasons who gets to give the message.
Censorship.
Yes, that's it. You're censored. You're out of here, mate. You better not question me again, or I'll kick you out of the call. Then it'll be even worse,
Bye.
We've got to hear it first up. Emergent Reasons message to the community.
Oh shit. Okay. Yeah. As usual, I think it's just build, right? Build commerce, build economy, do the thing, find a way that BCH is useful for you, right? Like, if it's not useful for you, then don't use it. If you have ideas for how it can be useful and how it might help your business or how it might help you to accomplish whatever it is that you're doing, start using it, because I'll just predict that going forward, there's going to be growing pressure on everyone in the world, right? It's already there for so many people, for over 1 billion people. The pressure that they can't participate in what they talk about on the news, the headline of economy is doing great. No, it's not. What are you talking about, right? The reality around people does not match what the headlines are. But I think that the number of people that are affected by that is going to be growing over time. And there's going to be pressure for people to find alternatives, to find other ways of doing things. So look for it. Be the first person that finds a way and shows people how to use permissionless money to run a business, to run an organization, to do investments, to do a nonprofit to help people. Whatever it is that you do, see if you can find a way, because you might be a trailblazer that helps people that come after you with, as this pressure, CBDCs and so forth start to as that pressure starts to grow, people are going to be looking for alternatives, and it'll be great if you are there and you figured it out already and can show people how to do things. So everybody keep building and keep doing the thing.
All right, pretty excellent message to the community, I'd say there. So that will pretty much do it for the show. Thank you to all the donators as per usual. Thanks to my Patreon, Ricky. I've shielded about 5 times, but check out bitcoincashpodcast.com. Loads of good stuff there. Start guide, FAQ, the music that I've made, like recommended links to all the social media displays where you can follow this. It's all there. So yeah, go check that out. And well, Cheap Lightning, you definitely get a shout out, but I'm gonna sneak mine, and my first one in here too was gonna be the Zone Crypto, who's in the chat, who commented in for the first time and asked a couple questions and stuff, and I don't know, it seems to have really enjoyed it. So shout out to you out there on the internet watching. I'm glad you enjoyed it. So that's me, Cheap Lightning. Where can people find you, and what does the community need to hear? But
summarize it in 10 seconds. I'm just going to say copy paste everything John said, plus meow. And then as far as finding me, Cheap Lightning everywhere. We're all, we're all goods and services are available. Check out Cheap Lightning. There you go. Yeah, that's it. Thanks.
Emergent Reasons, final shout outs.
Oh, shout outs?
Yeah, you get a shout out as well as a message to the community. It's just like
what?
Christmas,
So okay, I'm gonna make one specific shout out. So there's so many people doing amazing things and all kinds of interesting things and all kinds of different dimensions in Bitcoin Cash to make this alternative money available, right? But I actually want to give a shout out inside the ecosystem. So there's this guy that you guys may have heard of. He has a QR code for a face. Sometimes he looks like Jim Friend. But IMU name is criminally underutilized by whales, by opinion leaders, by influencers, and so forth. He is the strategist that has, in my opinion, kept Bitcoin Cash alive. People don't see it because they don't know how things have gone, how things have played out, like where the strategies that people have executed came from. But yeah, I want people to make use of him and listen to what he says more, because he's probably the best strategist in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem. So I hope people will listen to what he's talking about and also consult with him when they have some big decisions to make. That's my shout out.
Great shout out. Jet, any shout out this week? Nope, nothing. All right, well, that'll do it. Thanks everyone for listening. Until next time.
Take care. Thanks, Jeremy.
An unstoppable will kept the blockchain alive, and community grit simply arrested the slide. Suffered plenty of hate from doubters on the sidelines, drew on passionate drive where strength comes from inside. So this is your notice, written down in these rhymes. You can stick with your banks, or you can move with the times. Join us now or later on, cause I really